Sword of Coming Chapter 923. The Fengyuan Ferry is approaching Xiandu Mountain. The immortal named Dragon Gate at Taishu Mountain has indeed visited the surrounding mountains and rivers of Xiandu Mountain. When Yu Feng returned to Mishua Peak, he saw that the disciple was sitting on the railing of a viewing platform with Jing Yugan and chatting. Yomo responded to the old saying about women being extroverted. Tan Ningzhou was talking to Jing Yugan, if you can't do anything, it's better than anyone else. Sure enough, the senior brothers and sisters, including themselves, are of course the uncles and uncles of many Taishishan monks. Sure enough, he didn't want to embarrass the disciple, so his figure quietly fell on the ridge of the roof. It is rare to be a master to do this. After all, he was a fairy, and he was not an ordinary fairy. Gue Xianyu couldn't see it, and he was able to tell at a glance. For example, Yunjing Mountain and Sumiao Mountain, which form a three-mountain pattern with Xiandu Mountain, really saw through the blindness, and the two stone steels on the top of the mountain were also seen clearly. Cui Dongshan shrunk the mountains and rivers, stepped to his side, and said with a smile, Long Mendo has friendly eyesight. Sure enough, he smiled and said, it's an offense for failing to control my eyes. Cui Dongshan waved his hand and smiled, fellow Daoist Longmen said this out of the blue. Sure enough, I looked around and couldn't help but admire, Leishan and rocks are already another kind of knowledge. In my opinion, there is also a gully in the chest, but it is actually more difficult than painting. Moving a few hills, moving a few rivers, it's not difficult to piece together a picture that is dependent on mountains and rivers. It's difficult to fill in without traces and agree with each other on the road. Just say that on this dense snow peak, the earth, wood, roads, flowers and trees, and the smoke and clouds are rendered, temporarily seem rough, but in fact they are all wonderful. I will spend some time in the future, transplanting old trees, sparsely and obliquely, manage powder books, high and low shades, it is really a mountain and water resort. Friends of Longmen Taoist have a good reputation. Cui Dongshan hugged the back of his head with his hands, shook his head and smiled. On the scale of the weather, the old blind man who is no more than 100,000 mountains, on the subtlety, we have an old cook on the Luopa mountain, who is the real expert. Sure enough, he laughed. It's like sincerely praising a person for their good poetry, and the person who is praised says that he is inferior to Bai Yi and Su Zi. How can people answer the conversation? Cui Dongshan looked into the distance. Fengyuan ferry boat was about to dock. He patted the roof with his hands, his slid all the way out of the roof, and finally fell to the observation deck. Facing this white-clothed boy, Xing Yuqian and Tan Ningzhou both had the same title, Sect Master Cui. Cui Dongshan nodded to the little girl in greeting, then turned to look at Jing Yugan, and complained, call the Lord, call the little brother. Xing Yuqian had to change his name. On the side of Suzerain Cui, who is easygoing and witty, Jing Yugan is actually not too restrictive. Cui Dongshan said goodbye, his figure turned into a white rainbow, and went straight to the wind and kite ferry. Seeing the pair of masters and apprentices Lu Jinglong and Bai Shou, Cui Dongshan smiled and said hello, Sect Master Lu, Brother Bai. When Bai Shou saw that there was only Cui Dongshan and no one, he was relieved and smiled and clasped his fists. He made an exception and did not call Cui Dongshan a brother. Instead, he used a formal name, Sect Master Cui. Cui Dongshan suddenly said to Lu Jinglong, Sect Master Lu worked hard. Lu Jinglong had to pay back. Mi Yu was in a temporary retreat. The fairy had already sent a letter to Mi Xiafeng from the Flying Sword. Cui Dongshan asked in his heart, when will Sect Master Lu retreat? Lu Jinglong said frankly, it's hard to say for the time being. Of course, Cui Dongshan is very concerned about this matter. In the future, if your husband needs help in the Qingming world, the least hesitating and able to help him, except for the teacher, it must be Lu Xianyang and Lu Jinglong. Maybe a Zhang Shanfeng will be added, but this high disciple who is lying on the top of the mountain, he seems to be really not anxious about the matter of breaking through cultivation. Leading the group of people off the ferry personally, Cui Dongshan suddenly remembered something and rubbed his chin. Isn't it unintentional? His own Qingping Jinzong. Lu Xianying's Longquan sword sect, Lu Jinglong's Taihui sword sect. Plus the Dragon Elephant sword sect and Duckweed sword lake. There are already 5 kendo sections. But Cui Dongshan was also curious about what Zhang Shanfeng hadn't come yet. The palm rhythm of Pushan Yunkatang is already in Xiandu Mountain. On the side of Mixifeng Mansion, I learned that my mountain owner and Qin Yingguan asked me for a fist, and he was so energetic from the end that he succeeded in returning to the real world. Tan Rong hugged his fist and congratulated him. Congratulations, Shanju. It is indeed gratifying that Wu Fu is in the end. It is the natural resources and the opportunity to be indispensable, and the level of the end is full of vitality, return to the truth, and greatness, and it is even more difficult to think about breaking through. Yi Yunyun nodded and said, thanks to Chen Jiangxian's help, I don't need Pushen to repay this favor, I will take care of it myself. Anyway, she will serve as the honorable guest of Xiandu Mountain, and she is also a Jade Pure Realm practitioner, and she certainly has no shortage of opportunities to repay favors. Tan Rong remembered a secret incident, and asked, the Patriarch's Hall has produced an extra biography for no reason. What is going on? It turned out that there was a black-clothed boy, whose alias was Cui Wanzhan. Under Tan Rong's secret arrangement, he had used a relatively unobtrusive method to become the latest disciple of Yunkatang. He claimed that Cui Wanzhan was in the 6th realm. Pure Takeo. Tan Rong had previously received a secret letter from Yi Yunyun. Although the Master of Law was confused, he could only do so. This kind of thing, logically speaking, does not conform to the ceremonial system of the Patriarch Hall. After reaching the Mishua peak of Xiandu Mountain, Tan Rong knew that the young man turned out to be the first sect master of the lower sect of Luopa Mountain. Yi Yunyun shook her head and said, don't ask. Tan Rong stared, and he was about to break the casserole and ask to the end, is it true that my Pushan Tang Law is a decoration? There will always be a day when things will come to light. You might as well watch the changes in Tanzhong Law. Anyway, it's not a bad thing. Xue Huai hurriedly helped warm up the field and said with a smile, it's just that Sect Master Cui took such a weird pseudonym, Cui Wanzhan. Yi Yunyun thought for a while, like Jin Zhezhou, there is a long-standing martial artist who has been famous for a long time, nicknamed Han Wanzhan. Tan Rong had to put down his doubts for the time being, and nodded. I heard a friend on the mountain say that his real name Han Guanghu is the top spot in Takeo-ri of Jin Zhezhou, or a dynasty general of Jingguo. Han Guanghu is one of the people who presided over the battle in the terrible war in the mountains and rivers. He lined up his troops and was very well organized. In the end, together with the born sword fairy Su Jun, he stopped the frustration. Wanyan Lao Jing, I heard that Han Guanghu was seriously injured because of this, and fell into a state, so he was unable to participate in the proceedings of the Confucian Temple. Xue Huai sighed, I'm also a man. The sequelae of a pure samurai's fall is greater than the aftermath of the fall of a qi shi. Tan Rong suddenly said, is that Han Guanghu who assisted and dismantled the 6th monarch? It's no wonder that Tan Rong is lonely and ignorant. Tong Yezhou was already blocked from news, and Pushan Yunkatang was notoriously disliked to inquire about Shan's foreign affairs. At the beginning, even the neighbor Aquarius in the north, the monks on Tonggishao Mountain, at least had heard of some hills, the southernmost old dragon city, the Zhuiying dynasty, which had more sword repairs, belonged to Baiyu together with Taiping Mountain. It is estimated that no matter how many times it grows, it will be completely blinded. The only monk who knows his name is probably the rebellious and unruly literary saint leader, embroidered tiger Cui Yang. As for the Wufu song Chongjing of the Dai dynasty, it was only after he reached the end that Tong Yezhou began to hear about it. Tan Rong suddenly took out a Shanshui mansion report from his sleeve, and slammed it on the case in front of him. Shanzhu, let's talk about it. Except for Sect Master Cui, how many things are you hiding from me? Xue Huai's face was stern, and he tried not to laugh out loud. Tan Zhonglu's temperament is not small today. Tan Rong pointed to the Di Bao, and said angrily, "It's a big matter, what is it to hide from me? My discipline is really okay. I got a Shanshui mansion report from Dequan Tayedu Taoyuan other industry. This is because Tan Rong came to Xian Dushan by ferry. I only learned about it through the hands of friends. Generally speaking, Haren's diaries given by a Zongzitu Xianfu are more particular. There are many unwritten rules here. Even if it is some extremely important exclusive news, other Shanshui Debayos are not very good at it. Copy it, because a good talking sect may open one eye and close one eye, but if you encounter someone with a bad temper, you have to directly scold it. It is even possible to ask the teacher about the crime, such as there. In Beiju Luzhou, the number of times the Zushitang was unstable due to such a small matter could not be counted with one hand. Yi Yunyun was confused, stretched out her hand, grabbed the Dibao in her hand, and scanned it quickly. She stretched out her hand and rubbed her eyebrows. Tan Rong, believe it or not, I just learned about these things on the Dibao. If you hadn't used this diary report, I would have been kept in the dark even if I had attended the ceremony of the Lower Soul Mountain sect and became the famous guest of Qingping Sword sect. Xue Huai became very curious at once, and when he and his master were about to come to the report, he suddenly widened his eyes, his expression dignified, and his heartstrings became tense in an instant. Tan Rong saw that the expressions of the two of them did not seem to be false. Shanzhu, in the future, we will not be blind to the world in Pushun anymore. Yi Yunyun nodded and said, Jinghua Shui Yue and Shanshui Dibao will be given to you to take care of them in the future, asking people to give them and asking for money. Tan Rong asked in a low voice, how did Qin Jianxian do it? Earlier in Pushun, from the first sight of Qin Pingon, Tan Rong thought he hadn't underestimated him at all. Yi Yunyun glanced at this self-rule. It was the barren world I went to, you ask me? Tan Rong couldn't help sighing. This feat, outsiders like me, even if they just look at the Dibao, just think about it, they will make Dao's heart unstable. Xue Huai took the Dibao and browsed it twice, feeling deeply impressed by Tan Zangla's heartfelt words. The hermit led, and Lu Shen went with him. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world, engraved the old sword fairy Qi Tingji at the head of the city, the criminal officer Hao Su, and the great sword fairy Lu Ji. This kind of battle. This trip successfully killed two ascended realm great monsters. One of them was the great disciple of the great ancestor of Tuyua Mountain. Traveling together, leveling an ancient battlefield in an instant, destroying the White Flower City with the name of the Zong, rioting the Moor dynasty, interrupting the highest fairy hairpin city in the world, fighting against the throne demon Scarlet Concubine, dragging it down the river, the sword opened to support Yushan Mountain, and moved Mingyue Haotsai to the Qingming world. Bai Yujing was really invincible to personally lead this round of Mingyue. Don't say they were done one by one, they were all things that I didn't even dare to think about. Even Xue Huai was a little bit regretful. I only hate myself for not being a sword repairer. Tan Rong asked, Shan Lord, if Qin Jianxian puts aside his swordsmanship, and just as a pure martial artist, he asks Wu Pan, how will he win or lose? Xue Huai was actually very curious about this. Since his master had already lost, then only Wu Pan could contend with Qin Shanzhu in terms of boxing techniques. The world-ending warriors are different from the great monks at the top of the mountain. Every millennium has the big year and young years. The difference is obvious. The total number of the 10 worlds of warriors does not fluctuate much. Except for the divine continent of the earth, the rest of the 8 continents are spread out, roughly 2 per continent, and the number of people who have good deeds has been roughly counted. In the so-called world martial arts in a small year, when the situation is not good, the end of the 8 continents has never been less than 14 people. No matter how good it is, there will be no more than 20 people. On the other side of Beiju Luzhou, Guyu of the Great Seal dynasty a few years ago, and Yuankishan Jianxian Jiyue, died in exchange for their lives. So now the great masters of martial arts in the 3 continents in the east, in addition to the masters and apprentices of Qin Pingan and Pei Qian, there are also Dali Song Changjing, Lian Peak Li Er, Wang Fushuan, Wishing Wu Tan, and Pushan Huang Yiyun. Yi Yunyun obviously had an early draft, and she didn't hesitate to give the conclusion in her mind: if only the boxing score is superior, Wu Pan will win, but if it is a fight, Qin Pingan will live. Tan Rong smiled and said, "It's okay, anyway, now Qin Jianxian is considered half of us from Tonggishao." Xue Huai originally wanted to agree, but Yi Yunyun was already annoyed and said, "Point your face." Xue Huai nodded immediately and said, "It's not appropriate." Chen Shanzhu may not be willing to admit this statement. Furthermore, if this statement spreads, in fact, our Tong Yezhou is also shameless. Luopa Mountain is only Tonggishao where the next sect is located. As the head of the upper sect, Chen Pingan, the family register and the genealogy of the mountain are still in Beipingzu. Tan Rong glanced at Xue Huai, who was on the verge of rebellion, and said with a smile, "The grass on the wall, fall with the wind." The veteran General Yao Jin is compiling a military book at his desk. In addition to summarizing the gains and losses of his lives, battles and training records, he also organizes the martial arts experience of the Yao family of the frontier army. The old man army left something for the Daquan dynasty during his lifetime. This mansion is probably the only house on Mishua Peak that uses the earth dragon technique on the mountain. The ground is warm and the climate is like sunshine and spring. Therefore, there is no need for braziers in the house, and no need to wear thick cotton clothes or fox fur. Yao Xianji knocked on the door and entered, limping and sitting at the table. Master Fu Yin just got a piece of information from Mirage City, gently put that piece of information on the table, and said with a smile, "Grandpa, this Yu dynasty is a bit interesting. Now the old emperor hasn't left yet. I have already started the matter secretly. As long as the crown prince Yu Linyu ascends the throne, he will immediately change the name to the first year of the Shenlong. It seems to be the result of the consultation with the Qingtian supervisor, Liu Bilong, the true figure of Jitsue, who protects the country. The Yu dynasty, which has a close relationship with Lao Longqing, is very good at planning." The old general smiled. "It's not considered an officialdom to burn a cold stove. I'm afraid that a hot face will stick to a cold buttocks, but it won't be self-defeating. The newly appointed king of Donghai Sea is Wang Zhu, the only true dragon in the world." The name Shenlong used by the Yu dynasty was obviously an undisguised expression of goodwill. "I just don't know that the legendary ascendant female sister in Aquarius Island can't accept this love." The old man picked up the information, glanced a few times, and said with a smile, "His Royal Highness Yu is still quite good now. With the help of General Huang Shanshou, there is a Jitsue temple in the capital, and there is also a Green Seal sect on the mountain. It has also established a relationship with the old Longqing in the north. When the new monarch is changed, the country's momentum will rise, which is the general trend." Yao Xianji curled his lips, obviously not having a good impression of both the Jitsue temple and the Green Seal school. Once in a war, he ran faster than a rabbit. He learned the tortoise method and had to shrink his head when he had to shrink his head. The old man refolded the spy and returned it to his grandson, and said softly, "Don't look down on these people who don't take their faith seriously. If you provoke them, it is easy to succeed and fail. Furthermore, you have to admit that only real villains and hypocrites can do things, but honest men cannot do it. Seeing Yao Xianji still a little disapproving, the old man sighed. It is not a better moral article that defeats moral articles, but some indiscriminate histories of barnyard officials. Often hundreds of thousands of words of work cannot be worth a later article. A novel of a few hundred words. Yao Xianzi's expression was gloomy, because he thought of the emperor's majesty, and many privately engraved books are still banned today. Fortunately, compared to the grand event when literati and scholars had almost one copy, after a great war, it has disappeared a lot. You must know that when it was the most extreme of the year, even the civilian officials on duty in the Hanlin Academy would have some people reading these things, and the books had just changed their covers. Yao Zhen smiled and said, "The officialdom is not better than scholarship. How to use gentlemen and villains is a university question. The person who uses the best is called the top of the world, and may be the big brother of Qin Pingan. Otherwise, wouldn't you think that Dallas civil and military affairs are selfless, upright people and ethical scholars? Are they born capable officials?" Yao Xianji rubbed his chin. "If I could be like Mr. Qin, there is such an unrefined brother, Tusk." The old man shook his head and said, "You just stand up talking and don't hurt your back. In fact, there are such seniors who are under a lot of pressure. I don't even say that seniors are embroidered tigers. Like the Fenglai Garden in Aquarius Island, believe it or not, if Lu Ba there is no senior brother Huang He in the bridge, maybe he is now a sword fairy in the Yupu realm." Once Li Tuanjing left, once he succeeded as the owner of the garden, he couldn't help but catch his breath. Ba Qiao doesn't have that kind of indomitable mind. I believe that the reason why the Yellow River rushed to the wild battlefield, besides that he really wanted to go there to practice swords, was also a little pressure on Lu Baqiao. A family, a sect, it is probably the case. When one person is too eye-catching, the others will inevitably be eclipsed. Others will either develop inertia and lie under the big tree to enjoy the cool, or it is easy to lose heart. For example, their Yao family. Is it not the same reason? Yao Xianji asked tentatively, "Grandpa, you really don't persuade Mr. Chen anymore?" If Grandpa is really determined and tried his best to persuade Mr. Chen to serve as the national teacher of the Daquan dynasty, and dare not say that he will definitely succeed, there is still some hope after all. The old man shook his head and smiled. Being old and not dying is a thief. Relying on the old to sell the old is even more annoying. Do more things that are beautiful for people, and less things that are difficult for strong people. Yao Xianji knew that his grandfather was determined, so he didn't say anything more. Unexpectedly, the old man said with a smile, "Furthermore, what difficulties Daquan really has to do if he wants to do what he wants to do? Do I need you to say hello to Xian Dushan? I don't see it." Yao Xianji was amazed. "Jiang is still hot." The old man picked up his pen again and wrote a book, and said with a soft smile, "Life is full of flavors, no salt, no spicy, no joy." Just now when he wrote about the selection of military commanders, he had a little chat with his grandson, and he remembered a sentence for no reason, so he wrote the phrase, "Be strong and not rash." The old man only wrote a few words, then put aside his pen again and turned his head and looked out the window. Great work, vigorous and upright, pure and refined. Clouds move and rain, and the world is peaceful. There may always be a few truths, maybe it was what it was like 10,000 years ago, it is what it is now, and it will still be like 10,000 years later. Huang Ting wears a crown of hibiscus on his head and carries a long sword. Next to him stood the fellow Taoist Negative Mountain who was the shopkeeper of the Moxianda shop. Yu Jishan leaned on the railing and said with a smile, "This Xianda Mountain, looking at the family business, is not too big. There is only one Xianda Mountain, although there are several peaks, suitable for cultivation. It can support the opening of 5 or 6 earthly monks' mansions and Taoist temples, but for a sect, it still seems a bit barren." Huang Ting was a little absent-minded, wandering all over the world. Yu Jishan asked, "Miss Huang, that guy who helped us match up, what on earth is it possible for you to be the chief guest officer? You negative mountain really couldn't see the depth of the other side's Taoism and guard against thieves. I'm always worried that this guy will have something to do with my favorite girl, Huang. It's a rival. Yuangshan learned that Huang Ting had taken a trip to the colorful world. She is now a sword fairy in the Jade State. Therefore, Yuangshan is full of ambitions about the reconstruction of the Taiping Mountain. I need to smash the pot and sell the iron by myself, and I am absolutely willing, without frowning. As an ancient negative mountain fish, he was still a nascent soul realm cultivator, and his road-building skills were quite different from those of ordinary Qi practitioners. It's a pity that the threshold is too high to turn the river into a jiao. I used to not dare to act rashly. Because of the avenue's origin, once you walk through the water, you need to walk on a negative mountain. The higher the rank of the mountain, the better. Involved in a very dangerous landscape dispute, so in the future, there will be some disturbances in the river crossing. What's more, it's not just a one-time walk, and you will be able to succeed, just like the eel's spirit on the side of the river buried in the big spring in the early years, hasn't it been blocked by the goddess of the river water again and again? Therefore, the monks in the upper 5 realms of the Haoran world do not have many choices. One is the old ancestor of Xingyang Mountain who served as the protector of the immortal mansion, or a tycoon like the Jiang family of Yunlin. Get a genealogy status, otherwise you can only be like Mrs. Mai Huiwanzi Yan Yan, who can only escape the hanging mountain and find a stable dojo. Therefore, Yuangshan's earliest plan was to travel to Iazhao and find Wei Shi, to see if he can be combined with the eyes of this respected old to become the master of a peak. Wei Shi has the nickname of the Master of 37 Peaks, among which are the peaks of Lianri Peak and Baiyue Mountain. Has long been known as Dong Hao Ran, who are all spirits who practice in it. Huang Ting didn't care about negative mountain's thoughts of taking advantage of words, but just reminded, in this Xiandu mountain, remember to take your temper, be cautious in your words and deeds, and don't take your realm too seriously. Yu Jishan joked, I'm a veteran nascent soul monk anyway, plus this avenue roots and feet, in this Xiandu mountain, don't I walk sideways? Huang Ting couldn't help smiling and said, is the nascent soul realm great? Walking sideways. One accidentally is going to walk sideways. In fact, Yu Jishan didn't take his realm seriously. He just wanted to talk a few more words with Miss Huang, and continue to look for words. Could it be that there is a stranger from outside the world hiding in Xiandu Mountain? From the corner of Yu Minshan's eyes, he looked at the woman's smiling face. It was so beautiful. No wonder I fell in love at first sight. It's a pity that girl Huang can get her heart, but she may not get her body. I saw a Yufeng figure returning from a long journey back to Mishue Peak. It was the monk named Guoran. Huang Ting asked, Tai Shushan, have you always heard of it? Yu Jishan couldn't help but said, I'm a deaf person, and I must have heard of Tai Shushan. If it is a good choice to seek refuge in Wei Shi, then for the monks of their quirky backgrounds, Taishu Mountain in the Middle-earth Divine Continent is a sacred place fascinated by them. Sovereign Guooding, the road number is Yuming. This Ascension Realm great monk, rumored that he once slashed Huangquan Road. Even though he was on the road to the underworld, he successfully beheaded a ghost and retreated all over his body. Guooding's high combat power and killing power are by no means comparable to the old Ascension realm of Nangwangwang and his like. The real fire dragon once had a joke, fortunately, there is only one realm above the fairy and below the 14th. It is a pity that in the early years of Tonggishao, the news on the mountain was too closed, and there were only some old calendars about the strange things about the Taishu Mountain in the Middle Earth. Negative Mountain is just a shopkeeper at the Xianjia ferry. It was originally an evacuation, and it could not be called a small hiding in the city. There are 2 places in the world, and we must go in the future. Except for the non-flowering Taishu Mountain, Baidi City is located among the colorful clouds. Huang Ting continued to ask, "Have you met the little girl named Tan Yingzhou?" Yu Jishan nodded and said, "I've seen it a few times, and the little girl is always with a little spirit around. I advised the two children a few words, but don't go around like this outside the mountain, it is easy to get an accident." Today, Howren's world is peaceful, but for the monks who came from the mountain and the spirits, it is a kind of real troubled world. Fortunately, if the realm is high, it is good to say that it is recorded in the academy earlier, and it is considered a guide and an amulet, but the monster trainers under the immortals, especially the lower 5 realms, are now like a yellow mud in the crotch. If it weren't for the head of the Dafu Academy, Qinglongzhou, and the academy quickly issued a clear law, otherwise the local monster clan of Tonggishao, regardless of whether they are able to refine their shape, will probably end up miserably. U-Negative Mountain is a busy person. He usually likes to go out and wander around. He has visited Qingping, Zhanxian and Mishua many hills for a long time, and he is very familiar with the two children of Tan Yingzhou and Jing Yugan. According to Tai Shushan's genealogy, the little girl only needs to call Guo Uding her master. Huang Ting leaked the secret for Yuangshan. "You said Tan Yingzhou travels outside the mountain, can something happen easily?" It is true that accidents are only the ones who provoke the little girl. Yu Jishan was shocked and couldn't believe it. "What? That little girl movie is Guo Outing's grandson?" Only then did I realize that I was so close to Taishu Mountain. Huang Ting nodded and said, "The master of Tan Yingzhou, who you said was the sure enough that you didn't take the name, is actually Guo Outing's little disciple. A real immortal, once in Nanpa Suozhou, joined hands with the sword fairy Chao Shi to defend the Zhenhai Tower. At the Confucian Temple, he has done a lot of battle. As for the killing power, it's ugly, just use one. There is no difficulty in crushing a nascent infant realm with a finger." U-Negative Mountain swallowed. "Hurry up and think about it carefully to see if you have inappropriate words and deeds." Fortunately, he didn't hook up with the brother of the Dragon Gate. Huang Ting asked, "What is the name of the close disciple of Jing Juzhong in Baidi City?" Yun Gizan suddenly envied him. "It seems to be a goddess, Gu Kan, a madman. It is said that he was born in Lizhu Dongtian, Aquarius Island, and somehow became Mr. Jing's heir. It is really a Hongfu Qitian." Yuangshan didn't dare to be like Huang Ting, taking Guo Outing and Jing Juzhong one bite, and he didn't have Huang Ting's kind of mind. "Don't blame yourself for being timid, because it's not Jian Xiu." After waiting for a long time, before Huang Ting could say anything, Yunishan had to ask carefully, "Then? Huang Ting can never pick up Gu Kan casually. Could it be that the little spirit named Jing Yugan has any connection with Baidi City?" Yu Jishan's eyes lit up. He reached out his hand to stop Huang Ting's words, and replied, "I understand. This little spirit is a direct disciple of the Liuli Pavilion of Baidi City. It must be. Mr. Zheng of Beidasheng has a junior, named Lu Daochen, who is the master of the Liuli Pavilion, who is famous all over the world, and Lu Daochen is from a strange background and is very famous. You can infer other things, right? Generally speaking, Monk Howren is well known or not, there are some weird ways that can be verified. For example, Gu Qingsong has scolded, Lu Daochen has provoked, Tong Yezhou has heard of it, participated in the banquet of Tianqing Shinshan in Zhuhai Cave, and there is a name on a screen wall of the Dao Xian Mountain Master's knife room. These monks, it is best not to provoke them. Gu Qingsong can scold and Lu Dao dared to provoke him, except for both parties' own Dao law creation. In addition to being good, each has some reasons why others are not envious. One master was the third master of Bai Yujing. Although Lu Qin did not recognize this big disciple, the direct disciples of Lu Qin staying in the Howren world, like Chao Rong and He Xiaoliang, all treated Gu Qingsong, an anonymous master. Brother is extremely respectful. The other one is Xing Juzhong. Just talk about why the great celestial master Longhushan went down the mountain when he really needed to carry the 10,000 fa's of the fairy sword, and even carried the mark of Fang Yangping's merits with him. Demon down. Thinking that Lu Daochen is only the jade pure realm, but the great celestial master Zhao Tianlai is in the ascending realm, why bother to excite people like this? After all, Zhao Tianlai, with the sword and stamp on his hand, was still reminding Beidasheng, or in other words, reminding Jing Juzhong, the demon giant who was the senior brother of Lu Daochen. This trip down the mountain by Ping Dao was meant to bring down demons, so don't make trouble to the end, forcing Pang Dao to eliminate demons together. Huang Ting shook his head and said, according to the Confucianism temple, Xing Yugan is a student of Confucianism. Yu Jishan wondered, then what are we going to do with Gu Kan? Huang Ting was suddenly unwilling to say anything. You will understand when the celebration is tomorrow. By the way, when the celebration is over, we are not in a hurry to leave here. You can go to the Tsinjiai River with me and listen to it. Listen to the preaching of Mr. Xiao Mo, Yu Jishan asked, preacher. Who? The word preaching Dao is a very powerful word on the mountain, let alone Huang Ting said. Huang Ting smiled and said, older than you, higher than you, and more knowledgeable than you. Yu Jishan hesitated for a while, nodded and said, look back and listen to see if this humanitarian law is high. Huang Ting laughed off. She remembered a strange incident. On Xiaolonqia's side, Chen Pingan went to the wild garden at that time, and the mirrors that were forbidden by mountains and rivers were shattered on the spot. It is also the Mixufang residence, Kalinjiang old woman Chiu Du, and girl Hu Chuling, sitting on a mat made of reeds and rushes. According to the rank of the mountain, the straw mat is just a spiritual weapon. It is warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and the wealthy generals under the mountain can also afford it. Around the straw mats, there are 4 small and exquisite red gold walking dragons, which are slender and lifelike. The dragon's head has double horns, a long snout and a thin neck, and the dragon's tail is hooked back. It is cast from slender gold bars with chiseled scales. Chiu Du carefully took out some objects and placed them gently on the straw mat. Nothing compared to this straw mat, these old treasures in the dotted dragon palace are invaluable, which is not an exaggeration. The dragon, who once controlled the flow of water in the world, has countless treasures as the master of the rivers and lakes. Therefore, after the battle of the dragon, the ruins of the dragon palace, large and small, and the broken secret realm have become 2 major opportunities recognized on the mountain. On the straw mat, there is a night pearl that is as big as a fist, and 2 ancient mirrors with gleaming light. A bronze wax stand that can hold 2 candles at the same time. Finally, there is a green whisk. In addition, there are some relatively banal and cheap treasures, many of which have not been taken out for the time being. The old woman looked kind and said softly, very vinegar, if you like, just pick 2. I will give the rest to Xian Dushan and Chen Jianxian as your apprenticeship. No matter what, we must take advantage of the opportunity of holding a celebration tomorrow to help the vinegar and Chen Jianxian ask for the identity of a disciple, even if it is not registered for the time being. If it doesn't work, just take a step back and let the vinegar and sect master Cui apprentice and become the direct disciples of the lord of the sect. The girl stretched out a palm, pressed her palm against the night pearl, gently rubbed it, then picked up the whisk, gently waved it, put it on her arm, pretending to be a fairy. The girl was overwhelmed with joy, put down the whisk, and picked it up again. I played with the 2 ancient mirrors, and finally put them all back on the straw mat, patted their palms, and smiled and said, look at the ones that I like very much. Granny will help me choose 1 or 2. The old woman shook her head and said, on the path of spiritual practice, it is very important to have good or bad eyes. You have to choose your own vinegar and vinegar. Hu Chuling's eyes flickered, and finally one palm lightly patted the bamboo mat, and then pointed at the red gold dragon-shaped Shizhen, smiled and said, "Grandma, I need these 2 pieces." The old woman nodded with a smile. Regarding the jealous choice, the old woman didn't say yes or bad. The old woman just stretched out her dry palm, grabbed a handful of silver-white mirrors, sighed lightly, wiped it with her wrist, revealing a look of remembrance, and whispered, "This mirror is called a water-drawing mirror. Water is drawn from the lunarine. The monk holds a mirror to the moon and can absorb the essence of the bright moon. The monks who practice the water method are most suitable for refining natal things. It was once a young lattice dowry." Hu Chuling pointed to the other ancient mirror with layers of golden ripples on the mirror surface. It was similar in style to the water-drawing mirror, like a pair of Taoist couples. The girl curiously asked, "Grandma, what is the mystery of this mirror?" The old woman smiled and explained, "Usually, you only need to put it in the sun to warm up the ancient mirror, just like a monk vomiting it. It is amazing, you can accumulate the sun, and in the cold winter, the monk is only allowed to pour a little spiritual energy on the mirror surface. The light shines for hundreds of miles, and it is as bright as day. It is rumored that the monk hangs this mirror in the air and walks in the light, so even if he walks on that dark road, he will be able to invade the ghosts, but no one has tried this kind of thing. I don't know whether it is true or false." These 2 ancient mirrors were once a real Taoist who wandered all over the world. They were not too high in rank as a gift for being a guest in Dadu Longgong. They were just magic weapons, but they were made by the real Taoist man himself, so they were of great significance. It's a pity that when the Taoist visited the Dragon Palace, the old woman was still young and could not see the land in person. Only the older Dragon Palace teacher mentioned a Taoist name, Chunyang. He also said that the origin of the Taoist master is unknown, uninhibited, and his tone of voice is louder than the sky. He once said that the whole house was stunned, and there are countless immortals in the world, but it is a pity that they are all false. The Taoist priest held his chopsticks and knocked on the wine cup to make a knock yao song. It is rumored that there was a historian on the Dragon Palace that recorded this similar Tao Ju. He didn't dare to take it lightly, and even specially engraved it on the extremely rare Qingshanshan bamboo slips. However, within 3 days, the words on the bamboo slips disappeared by themselves. The most mysterious thing is that all the guest monks who were present here are exactly the same, but they only remember the last sentence of that piece of Tao Ju. If you cultivate a supreme pill, you will know that my way is not in vain. If you ask where this pill comes from, please refer to the word Chunyang. It is reasonable to say that such an expert in the game world, not to mention that it will definitely be famous in the world, it is not difficult to be famous all over the world, and there should be more or less fairy tales. But after so many years, Chiu Du has never heard the slightest news about the real Chunyang person. As for the inconspicuous wax platform, it is actually a lampshade. According to the mountain, it belongs to the kind of snail shell dojo. If you light the 2 secret candles of the Dragon Palace, the monks can enter them. At first glance, they are all a small house. After opening the door, it is a large city of mirages. The only difference is a day and a night. In fact, 2 mirrors and 1 wax platform can complement each other. In the end, the 2 illusions of lanterns are equivalent to the connection of day and night. The sun and the moon cooperate with each other, and the merits and virtues are perfected. Therefore, the most suitable pair of Taoist couples on the mountain under the land immortal, practice together, and get twice the result with half the effort. Hu Chuling blinked. "Grandma, did I pick the 2 least valuable items?" The old woman waved her hand quickly and said with a smile, "No, no." Hu Chuling saw that the master was reluctant to say more, so he didn't ask much. Chiu Du before the Battle of Slashing the Dragon, the secular dynasty used an ancient ritual to sacrifice to mountains and rivers, buried for sacrifices to land and mountains, and Shin for sacrifices to rivers and lakes. And these 4 Qi Jin walking dragons used by Qiu Du as Shizhen are the first female emperors in the history of Haoran, as the key sacrificial objects in the ceremony of buried in the earth and submerged in the water. However, there were a total of 18 items that year. On the side of Tongyi's Hao-dotted Dragon Palace, only one of them was obtained from the side of East Sea Dragon Palace. After that, 4 of them were collected through various concealment methods. Jian Xiu Tao Ran, who set up a stall on the other side of the Wanlixiu River, set foot on Xianda Mountain for the first time. Anyway, there is no acquaintance in the mountains, living alone in a house in Mixufeng, happy to have fun, and so far I have not seen the Qingshan swordsman who claims to be Qin Pingan. After Zhang Shanfeng left Luopa Mountain, he took the day by himself and took the old Longqing Intercontinental Ferry and disembarked at the Qingjingshan Ferry. Because I heard that the old Lu of Qinghu Palace is a good friend of Qin Pingan, and they are both friends. Dao sect person, I think he will not dislike his realm too much. Unexpectedly, the old Lu, the dignified Yuaning old god, is more than not disgusted, and he is so polite that Zhang Shanfeng will mistakenly think that he is the next abbot of Qinghu Palace. Zhang Shanfeng said it badly. Lu Lao Shinxian was willing to let himself go. He took him all the way to the ferry without saying a word. He also accompanied Zhang Shanfeng to board the ferry. He chatted with the ferry steward for a while, and finally asked for a day. The house of the name, the old just disembarked. Disembark at the next Xianjia ferry, some distance away from Xianda Mountain, but there is a ferry, you can go directly to the Maxian ferry, and finally Zhang Shanfeng began a trekking on the border of the dynasty that has not been restored for a few years. Anyway, it is a good time. Can definitely catch up with the sect celebration on the day of the beginning of spring next year, alone, the young Taoist priest carrying the sword box, walking in the night. Zhang Shanfeng drew out a yellow paper lantern talisman from his sleeve, twisted it with 2 fingers, and held it high. The old real person Liang Shuang, with his disciple Ma Xianhui, left Jiquiguan in Luojing, and soon found the progeny of Zhang Shanfeng. The old man did not show up directly, but found the Yuan Lingdian who was secretly protecting the road. He didn't have the identity of hiding, and he smiled and said, "Poor Dao Liang Shuang, I have only met Huolong once, even though he robbed his foreign surname Dadian. I'm a teacher, but I'm very happy with your master. You're the one that refers to the Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian, and you have a very heavy Dao Qi." Yuan Lingdian acted as the chief inspector of the Taoist monk. The juniors lie down at the Yuan Lingdian on the top of the mountain, and pay homage to the heavenly master Liang on Longhu Mountain. Liang Shuang said, "Huolong is so eccentric to Zhang Shanfeng. You guys who are seniors can still maintain this temperament. Lidifeng is indeed amazing. The style is so good, it can almost be said to be the only one." Yuan Lingdian smiled freely and said, "If you apprehend the teacher, you will worship the real fire dragon. This is a fact recognized by the world." In fact, the master is quite disapproving of this statement, and there is no apprentice in the Ascension realm. However, a certain brother once quickly added a sentence, "Except a disciple, then accept Zhongshan Peak," which immediately made master very happy. In the matter of cultivation, Yuan Lingdian doesn't feel that he is worse than anyone else. Only in this kind of matter, he is truly inferior to those fellow students. Earlier at the Qingjing Mountain Ferry, Yuan Lingdian quietly appeared, walked to the Qinghu Palace, and had to thank Lu Yong in person. Every monk at the boundary peak, traveling outside, there is no shortage of etiquette. At that time, Lu Yong learned that the other party was the back of Zixuanfeng Yuan Lingdian in Beiju Luzhou, and he was speechless for a long time. Because I have been to Aquarius Island, I know a lot about the illusions on the mountains of Beiju Luzhou. Even if Yuan Lingdian is a real fire dragon disciple, not to mention, it is only said that in the northern Zhu Luzhou where the sword is like a cloud, all of them are a Taoist priest of Yupu realm who is not a sword repairer can be said to be. It's not a problem to fight an immortal, then Yuan Lingdian's combat power can be imagined. Liang Shuang asked, "When will I go to Xiandu Mountain?" Yuan Lingdian said, "Let's see what the younger brother means." The old Jinren glanced at the young Taoist priest again, and said regretfully, "It's a pity that Taoist Chen Yang is not there, otherwise the weather will only be even greater for your brothers and sisters in the future." Yuan Lingdian smiled and said, "This kind of thing is not forced. What's more, in my opinion, it doesn't make much difference whether the junior brother has Lu Zu's guidance or not." Liang Shuang tweeted, "He deserves to be a disciple taught by the fire dragon real person. He speaks in one tone, but the old real person still doesn't approve of Yuan Lingdian's statement. The word pure yang means a lot." Yuan Lingdian smiled and nodded. Master actually mentioned this Taoist person with the name Chunyang, and he spoke highly of it. After all, he is a cultivator who can say that, "A golden pill is in my belly, and I know that I cannot help it." And Master's evaluation of true man Chunyang is actually just 2 sentences. Lu Qi and the detailed Lu Jin realm, one step to the sky, one pioneered the road, and the other stepped up a few steps. The Yuaning of the Aizhou Island Wei Shi, and the Qingming world Yao Qing's 3 corpses in this realm are inseparable. Compete. Lu Yan Jin Dan is the first, unparalleled in the world. The old man and his disciple Ma Xianhui followed Yuan Lingdian far behind Zhang Shanfeng. The young Taoist priest held the talisman, a little light in the night. Before that, Chen Ping'an asked the old man on the bank of the Jilin River outside the engagement shop for a copy of Longhushan Tianshifist transmission and rituals. It was Cui Dongshan, who didn't dare to say that he knew the whole process. To use Liang Shuang, a great celestial master named Longhushan, it was Chen Daoyu who had watched in advance. The old real man looked at the light in front, stroked his beard and smiled, feeling sentimentally. The person who wanders at night by Bingzhu is in the light. Sort of Coming Chapter 924. The chapter upload is late, sorry. The sky is burning with clouds, and the sunset glows thousands of miles. A dragon boat ferry named Fanma docked at a Xianjia ferry port, and a group of people prepared to change the ferry to Huangliang country. The leader of the team was a boy in Tsing Yi who swaggered off the boat, with 2 sleeves flung up, and there was a young girl beside her. Behind him was a young man in a Confucian shirt, with a yellow-clothed old man who looked obedient, with a strange appearance and eagle-eyed eyes. Just because of his skinny, he seemed to be wearing an extremely loose robe. In contrast, the young man seemed the most unremarkable. They are to be invited to participate in a celebration of the opening of the peak as guests. The uncle who walks with the wind, of course, is the Yuanying realm Shuijiao in the Luopa mountain, and the Zushitang is dedicated to Qin Lingjun. This time, Guizhujiu, who was a direct disciple of the mountain lord Qin Pingan, also went out with Qin Lingjun. Li Huai, a sage of Shanaya Academy, and the Baron Taoist pavilion known as the Nen Taoist belonged to eating and drinking, traveling far and wide. In addition to the famous Nen Taoist, in Tao Ting, there is also another Guanyu, who is also Shanzi Yeshio of Nanpa Suozhou, and the road name is Longshan Gong. Following them or to lead the way, there are 2 trainers of Yi Dai Feng, Song Yuan and junior sister Lu Runyan, with a young white fox lying lazily curled up on the latter's shoulders. 1 hour before he reboarded the ship, Chen Lingjun chose a waterfront restaurant at the ferry, intending to have a full meal, drink a little wine, and make sacrifices to the 5 internal organs temple. After all, the flicking dragon boat is its own ferry, and it's not plausible to eat and drink on it. The female sisters of Zhuchai Island have broken mouths, and if they reach the years of some stupid girl, they will inevitably have to gossip. Chen Lingjun stood on tiptoe in the lobby of the restaurant, with his hands lying on the high counter, craned his neck to look at the wooden sign menu on the wall, and ordered dishes with the store associates. As a result, he heard that there was another place called Zenlola. It is a new business that Chen Lingjun has never heard of. It turns out that many Xianjia ferry crossings on the north and south of the continent have established precious restaurants. The monks only need to give a deposit to the gods at the restaurant to send letters to the swords of each ferry. When the restaurant gets the news, you can order food. Zendala will use the secret food box made by the Xianjia to pack all kinds of delicacies from the mountains and seas, and help deliver them to the gate of the mountain to ensure that the taste is exactly the same as the dine-in. It's just that the extra toll has to be calculated according to the landscape. The boy in Tsing Yi was stunned for a long time, and Uncle Chen was eye-opening today. Can business do this? It's just that Nujiadu in Hongzhou town, a little further away, didn't open a rare restaurant. Li Huai will inevitably have some guesses. Isn't it Dong Shuijing's handwriting again? Does this kind of business really have business? Because of the large number of people, it was unreasonable to join the table. Chen Lingjun asked for a private room, started with 10 snowflakes, and soon a table was filled with dishes. Chen Lingjun ordered 2 pots of wine, raised his legs, and sipped a sip of fairy wine. Turned his head and looked out the window. On the side of the ferry, several private rune boats came to the shore one after another, so that they would not run into a rampage, but without exception, they would shake their arms about the swiftness of the rune boat. Chen Lingjun glanced at the characters on the rune boat. Most of them are young men with Yingying and Yanyan. They are like having 2 characters carved on their foreheads. They are rich. As for the look in people's eyes, it's just 2 words, poor ghosts. The Taoist Nen is just for a drink, and should not be careless about the matter of protecting the Tao. Greedy and misfortune. Impossible, it's just a gesture. God knows if he will be dragged into a dream by the old blind man again, and how many feet will he step on. After all, the old blind man always looks at his mood when he does things, and he is totally unreasonable. The last time that was successful, the old blind man had a rare conscience to discover that he randomly lost an ancient book on Tao Ting, which is the upper half of the mountain-making art. These days, Tao Ting did not slacken for a moment, and they are all in retreat. Of course, for Tao Ting, the so-called retreat is not the kind of ordinary ascension monks, who are looking for a mysterious landscape in the general sense. The nest does not move, and Yuanying and Feishing, 2 realm monks, have been ridiculed by the mountain as the 1,000-year king and 80,000-year turtle. Of course, Tao Ting is not so shabby. Tao Ting, as the ancestor of the ancient Hushan line, the well-deserved originator of the mountain, and the head of the mountain-moving line, who was the great demon of the old throne, is completely a wild great demon of the same generation and age, because both sides follow the mountain. If you don't deal with it, the 2 sides will naturally have an invisible avenue dispute. When it comes to driving the mountains and moving to the mountains, Tao Ting believes that it is no worse than Yuan Shou, only in the mountain, which is much inferior. Simply put, it means moving mountains and pushing mountains. The 2 skills are similar, but Tao Ting is really no better than Yuan Shou in the ability to eat mountains. In a barren world where the strong eat meat and the weak are eaten meat, the 2 sides have a conflict, and the one that cannot be beaten can only avoid its edge and escape. Back then, the young and energetic Tao Pavilion was once ambitious. He tried to build a high mountain with his natal supernatural powers, and to speak out. It was a green mountain, higher than the wild mountain, Green Mountain. As for the pickling trade between Fei Fei and Yangji, it's okay to deceive ordinary monks. For the mountain monster, how can you know the inside story? Tao Ting is not rare to learn, and Zhu Wei is also a person who doesn't like to establish sections. Tao Ting had no choice but to seek for wealth and danger. See if there is a chance. At the edge of the 100,000 mountains, today, steal one. Tomorrow, I moved one, and when I was full, I went to share with Zhu Wei. As a result, I was caught by the old blind man and became a watchdog. Those unspeakable and bleak years, I don't want to think about it. Therefore, being able to obtain half of the mountain refining art from the old blind man is a beautiful thing that Tao Ting dare not dream of. The destination of their trip was a fairy house on the mountain called Huangliangbai. In the territory of Mengliang, in addition to the Yunxia mountain, which is expected to be among the sect, there is also a Xianjia sect that cannot be underestimated, that is, the Huangliang school. Reluctant, top-notch and wronged mountain immortal mansion, now the entire territory of Aquarius Island south of Aquarius Island has countless broken hills, and the status of the sect has risen with the tide. Those enclaves that do not border the Zhu mountain are separated by a distance. If you learn from the upper sect and descend from the sect, you will be divided into uphill and downhill. The Huangliang school is the uphill of Chuzhou Yidefeng. The head of the mountain is a very old, young, golden core, but a sword repairer. Back then, he once sent a close disciple to seek opportunities in the Lizhu cave. As a result, the bamboo basket was empty for fetching water, and there was no gain. He gave a bag of money for the new year as a pass, not to mention, the other bag was more than the money, the monk. In order to get acquainted with the thriving Dolly Song family, he used the remaining gold and copper money in the bag to buy a mountain on the west side of Lizhu cave. He did not sell the mountain for a low price or relocate. In fact, the head was somewhat selfish. The Jindan patriarch who later moved to Yidefeng Jimao to practice cultivation was extremely poor in the martial art. Respectfully invite the uncle to sit on the mountain. At that time, the price of buying Shantao was not cheap, and it proved to be a waste of money. It was started with a very low price. A few years ago, the mountain forces who wanted to buy Yidefeng with the Huangliang faction had two hands, and the bids had more than doubled or quadrupled. It was simply a priceless market. Especially when the young sword fairy of Luopa Mountain and Lu Xianyang of Longquan sword sect joined forces to make a fuss on Zhengyang Mountain and became famous in the first battle. Beiyue Piyun Mountain, Luopa Mountain, Longquan Jianzong, no matter who they have a relationship with, it is an unimaginable mountain incense love. The only minor problem is that the Beiyue night banquet always feels like a bottomless pit. However, I also saw it early, anyway, in the Zhongyue realm. Dashan Jun Jinqing also began to play the black hand. Escaped past the first day, but not 15th. Waiting for the Shanshui Dibao from Shanhaizong to spread throughout Haoranjiuzhou, which is equivalent to telling the world the name and identity of the hidden official. The Huangliang pie is getting more and more headaches. If the price negotiated to purchase Yidefeng was a high price, it is now a sky-high price. The problem is that the Golden Core Patriarch's answer to Zhu Shan is very simple, not for sale. Therefore, this time the headmaster took advantage of the opening ceremony of a direct disciple ascending to the Golden Core, and secretly made a gentleman's appointment with that uncle. If he can invite monks from Luopa Mountain to observe the ceremony, Lu Shan will not mention it anymore. And the sale of Yidefeng, but if Luopa Shan declined this matter, the uncle would have to visit the Patriarch Hall to discuss the matter. Guozhuzhou asked curiously, Xiang Song, do you Huangliang school have anything to do with the Huangliang fortune land that has been removed from the 72 fortune land? Rumor has it that there was a Huangliang shop selling Forget Worry wine on the top of the upside-down mountain. As for the title, Little Song Immortal Master, Guozhuzhou has learned everything. It was the close disciple of the old Jindan monk from Yidefeng. It seemed that senior sister Pei Qian called it out at first. Later, everyone on the side of Luopa Mountain yelled. Song Yuan smiled and shook his head and said, Miss Gua, I really don't know this. I have never heard Master talk about it. The Huangliang school is an old school with a long history. The ancestral mountain is named Lushan. It is located in Biei County, Huai'an Prefecture, Huangliang State, and is rich in golden pills. There have been more than a dozen Golden Core land immortals in history, but life and death cannot produce a single Yuaning. Of course, the so-called rich golden pill is only compared to the former Aquarius. The Huangliang faction invited the monks of Luopusheng to participate in the ceremony, which is just a matter of giving it a try. I didn't expect that the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi would come to Lushan, and I didn't even think that there would be monks climbing on Luopa Mountain. It was an unexpected great honor, but it was a matter of reason, and I had to try it. Unexpectedly, on the side of Luopa Mountain, a letter was quickly replied in the name of the Patriarch of Ji Sifeng. It was an autograph by the steward Zhu Lian. The wording was extremely polite, saying that the Mountain Lord had not returned now, so Chen Lingjun and Guozhu could only be asked. Jiu participated in the celebration on his behalf, and introduced the identities of the two in the letter. After receiving this reply, the Huangliang faction even convened a meeting in the Patriarch's Hall specifically for this purpose. Even if you don't say that Chen Lingjun is a nascent soul stage, it is the woman named Guozhuzhou who turned out to be a direct disciple of Qin Shanzhu. The key point is that she is still a little disciple. According to the humorous statement on the mountain, it can be regarded as half a student. Closed disciple. Lu Runyan is very familiar with the worship of that boy in the Tsingyi Lopeishan Yuanying. The other party often finds his grandfather to drink and talk about the mountains, call his grandfather Lu brother, and call his sister Lu, a mess of generations. Grandpa said in private that this old brother Qin, Dao Qianqing, was amazing. It is really difficult for Lu Runyan to link that unrelenting Tsingyi boy with a Yuaning old god. It was the girl named Guozhuzhou who was interested in Lu Runyan, as if she had only come to Luopa Mountain not long ago. It's just that the other party's background and realm are not clear. Now the mirror flowers of Yidefeng is a must. Even the Shangshan Huangliang school has heard of it. There are very few visitors, like 2 or 3 people throughout the year, but every time they make a lot of money. Scary. Within a few years of work, how could there be 2 Gu Yuqin credits in the account, so that in the end, Grandpa simply opened one eye and closed one eye? Anyway, granddaughter Lu Runyan never needs to show off, scratch her head and pose, and Zhou Fairy who is watching the green plums of Nantang Lake is not a mirror of love. Satiated with wine and food, Chen Lingjun finished checking out, left the restaurant, patted his stomach, and took the lead to board the ferry to Wangliangdu. Taoist Nin just wanted to rush to pay, but he couldn't compete with Daoist Jingqing. Guozhuzhou smiled and asked, "Since you are not at ease, why go down the mountain for a long trip?" Master once said that every time Chen Wanchu went to buy from Zhouqing, a guy would follow him secretly along the way. Chen Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, "Where is it?" Guozhuzhou asked again, "Do you know what I'm asking?" Chen Lingjun categorically said, "I don't know." Guozhuzhou laughed. Chen Lingjun felt a little guilty. Li Huai was at a loss. You two are playing dumb puzzles. When Song Yuan and Lu Runyan went to another house, Guozhuzhou and the others sat down in Chen Lingjun's residence first, and she asked, "Are there many such friendships?" Chen Lingjun nodded vigorously and said, "A lot, a lot. The more the Daxian mansion is, the more frequent such things will happen." In addition to the opening ceremony of the Golden Core monks like the Huangliang school, there are also weddings on the mountain. Becoming a Taoist companion is also a major event. You have to give money to the members, and then the old ancestor successfully retreats, and you have to do it. The ancestor hall has accepted apprentices, and you have to change the head or the mountain master, so and so it's broken, mainly young children, and the Dongfu realm among the middle 5 realms, etc., all have to be courteous. Chen Lingjun got up and bent over and poured a bowl of tea for all 3 of Guozhuzhou, but on our hilltop side, the master used to run alone, and the master was busy with everything. It is not our turn to be distracted by these common tasks. Guozhuzhou asked with a smile, will you dislike us? Not enough cards. The red tape in the vast world can only be more than these various ceremonies. Chen Lingjun laughed, just kidding, just let's go out alone. The Huangliang faction will feel like it's incense burning, and the ancestral grave is full of smoke. Chen Lingjun hurriedly added, this kind of remark, that is, to talk casually with the door closed by the family, is not serious, not serious. Away from home, to give face to others is to give face to yourself. This truth, tusk, knowledge is greater than the sky. Taoist Nen nodded in approval and said, Daoist Lingjun, he is still loyal and veteran. After chatting for a few words, Li Huai took the Taoist gentleman to another house. The group of people were not adjacent to each other. Of course, it was because of the lack of money. Chen Lingjun also made an exception and did not rush to check out. Because this toll was paid by Yidefeng Song Yuan for Yidefeng and Huangliangpai, Chen Lingjun had picked up the house early when he bought the boarding wooden sign at the ferry, and Song Yuan had no chance to ask the ferry. The best houses. The ferry lifted off, the sea of clouds was surging, and the sun fell into a cave. When the ferry entered the border of Huangliang country, Li Huai walked out of the house and came to the stern deck. Taoist Nen quickly followed here, standing by a railing, swam his sights, nodded and suddenly squinted, yeah, Lingyue is righteous, and Xianwei borrows the magical soldier. Lu Shana. The landscape of the land is a bit interesting. Reflected by Daobing Xuanji, the mountain is like a person wearing scarlet clothes, and the little gourd is planted deep in the ground, and there is a longevity treasure hanging goldfish bag. The Taoist Nen looked more and more surprised, shook his sleeves, put out a hand, and counted. As the ancestor of the Hushan line, he can tell the ins and outs of the world at a glance. Li Huai could only remind him in his heart, don't be messy, people have worked so hard for more than 10 generations, and we are guests again. The Taoist Nen said aggrieved, my son, this is so sad to say. I speak fiercely and do things appropriately. I don't dare to compare with the sun. I am more peaceful than that of Qin. It is always between my peers. Li Huai laughed off. Taoist Nen asked tentatively, my son, I saw a place with a lot of background. Let me check it out. I don't do it, but I take a close look. It can't be said to be a great opportunity. Anyway, it's the Huangliang School and Yunxia Mountain. Under his nose, so many years have passed, and the two groups of people have not been able to find out, and they are not within the boundaries of their hilltops. According to the rules of the mountains in the world, it is a matter for those who can. Anyway, there is still a little half a month away from the opening ceremony of the Huangliang sect. Li Huai hurriedly waved his hand and said, don't, you can go by yourself if you want to. As long as the rules are not bad, you can do it with you. Before traveling with Pei Qian to Luzhou in North Ju, it fell into a psychological shadow and almost lost money. Taoist Nen asked, really not going? Li Huai shook his head. Taoist Nen sighed, if you don't go, I won't go either. With a handy chance, the contents of the bag are gone, just like a cooked duck has been placed on the table, but the sun is not willing to serve it. Li Huai asked, is the chance not small? Taoist Nen mistakenly thought that things had turned for the better, and said in a deep voice, not small. Li Huai smiled and said, very good, I can completely give up, anyway, I will only miss it. The Taoist Nen was dull and speechless. I always feel wrong, but I feel that it makes sense. Taoist Nen gave a long sigh, nothing more. Taoist tender people often get a little hairy by the little girl named Guizhuzhou. Nowadays, there are different opinions about the rumors of Taoist Nen. One theory says that Nongguang was done by Taoist Nen, but because of the rules of the Confucian temple, it was done concealed, so it used a haunting pseudonym. There is also a saying that the reason why Nan Guangzhou was cut off by Jianxiu Haosu was because of the Battle of Yuanyangzhu, a battle with the tender Taoist who turned out to be born, hurting the roots of the main road, and had to return to the sect. Haosu missed it after he was in retreat. As for the third argument, Taoist Nen was indeed born in a spiritual and blessed land, and he was an old sword immortal who was not revealed. His real name was Haosu, a criminal officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Of course, Taoist Nen doesn't care at all about this. Anyway, it's the reputation earned by one's ability. As for the true or false, it doesn't matter at all. As long as the old blind man himself doesn't object, it doesn't matter if you say that you are the old blind man's brother, the brothers will all be successful. On the Bao side, Chen Lingjun and Guo Zhuzhou happened to be enjoying the scenery. Because of their short stature, Chen Lingjun could only put his chin on the railing. Guo Zhuzhou suddenly smiled and said, "I was in the summer palace before, and the master said about you, saying that you are the one who is always rushing to check out." Chen Lingjun was a little embarrassed. He understood the meaning. The master was saying that he was stupid. Guo Zhuzhou continued, "Master also said that this is not stupid, but just waiting for a friend who is rushing to check out with him." "Wait, it's the rivers and lakes." "Can't wait, it's still the world." The mountain top of the Qingzhou school is an old site of a broken secret realm. Although it is not among the blessed places of the cave, it is also a real feng shui treasure. As one of the scenic spots, Shijianshu is rare to be so lively today, because there are two groups of distinguished guests to visit the scenery. One party came from the Yu dynasty, which shared the same honor and disgrace. His Royal Highness Yu Linyu, together with his wife Zhu Sun, and a small-character young slave, were a guest of the Qing Seal School. The other two were Biezhou monks who belonged to the veritable, crossing the river dragon. A young man dressed in black robes, Jun Yi, had an old dragon cloth rain pendant hanging from his waist. It is Fu Nanhua, the young city lord of the old dragon city in Aquarius. There is also a young handsome man from the old Longqing Ho family, named Ho Dao. This person and the deputy head of Wuxi Academy, Ho Mian, are of the same generation in the family tree. The Ho family was the first to get on the line with the old emperor of the Yu family, and the two hit it off. And the Ho family in old Longqing was originally a vassal of the Fu family. As the host of the Qingzhou school, the ostentation of hospitality this time is not small. In addition to the head of Gao Shuwen, there is also Daiyuan who is responsible for looking after the scenic spot of Jianshu. In addition to the two Golden Core immortals, there are also the female Xiao Miaoyu who is in charge of the money of the Qingzhuan school, and a group of direct disciples of the ancestors. Those who can be there are all here, and I dare not neglect the slightest. Su Bai is the only one who is in charge of the discipline. He is a direct disciple of the ancestor Gao Shuwen, and he is busy outside at the moment, which is a mistake. After this opportunity to cling to the nobles, Gao Shuwen pointed to an ancient sword hanging on the ancient tree, and introduced with a smile, "Brother Fu, Master Ho, this sword is the sword of the sword immortal Lu Fang. He traveled here early, and Lu Fang was drunk. Hang here." Dai Yuan was slanderous in his heart. His own great master really knew how to be a man, and neither of the two distinguished guests should be guilty. A bottleneck sword immortal in the nascent soul realm, even in the former Tongyi's Hao, was considered a top-notch figure. What's more, Lu Fang is a mountain cultivator. Once he breaks the mirror, he has the opportunity to become the first mountain cultivator in the 5 realms on a continent. The key point is that Lu Fang is still Jiang Shangzhen's best friend on the mountain. Unfortunately, Lu Fang disappeared for many years for no reason. He didn't even show up in the battle. There was only a rumor saying that Lu Fang went to the Taoist temple in the East China Sea, as an exile immortal, seek a breakthrough opportunity over there. Fu Nanhua said his name twice in his heart, Lu Fang. Landboat. Why did you choose such an unlucky name? Fu Nanhua turned his head to look at Prince Yu, and apologized. It was supposed that I went to Luojing to pay a courtesy to His Royal Highness, but this time I went south across continents. I have to meet some business partners here, by the way. They are all the monks of Biezhou, worried that if they meet at Luojing, the prince is now in charge of supervising the country, and it is unavoidable that this is distracted, so he has to let the prince invite the prince to do this. Sorry. Speaking of this, Fu Nanhua was actually making a salute with Yu Linyu again, which was regarded as an apologize. Yu Linyu hurriedly returned the courtesy. Master Fu's words are heavy. Nowadays, every continent knows that the master of the Yu dynasty is not only the Hou family on the bright side, but also the old Longqing Fu family behind the Hou family. Without the full and secret support of the Fu family, the reconstruction of the Yu dynasty would never have been so fast, let alone one of the top 10 dynasties of Tonghizhao in one fell swoop. It's just that almost half of the top 10 dynasties now have people behind the scenes like the Fu family. Therefore, Yu Linyu followed Gao Shuwen to the Qingzhuan school this time, and was mentally prepared to suffer some sullenness on Fu Nanhua's side. The Lord Fu Qi has been in retreat for nearly 2 full years. In fact, in the years after the war, Fu Nanhua was taking care of specific affairs. The 2 biggest rivals other than the city lord, Fu Donghai and sister Fu Chunhua, were actually equal to officially withdrawing from Laolong. The battle for the lord of the city. But when Fu Nanhua was still a monk in the Sevuing realm, both Fu Donghai and Fu Chunhua were already Jindan Dixian, and they each managed a business route, and they were not doing badly. But even so, Fu Nan seems to be the most partial to the youngest son of Fu Nanhua. He held an ancestral meeting before the retreat. Regardless of whether he succeeded in this retreat, Fu Nanhua will succeed him as the lord of the old dragon city after the beginning of the spring next year. And before Fu Qi retreats, he actually sent the children out. The 2 earth immortals are like vassal kings who have left Beijing. Anyway, the old Longqing family has a thick family base, and it was once in the treasure north of the old dragon city. Many hilltops and mansions were bought in various places in Pingzhou, and they were left vacant for many years. Moreover, the wife that Fu Nanhua Ming Media is marrying is the daughter of Jiang clan of Yunlin in Aquarius, so the Prince Yu Linyu never imagined that the other party would be so polite on his side. In addition, there is an ancestor of the Fu family who is in charge of an attack on a half-celestial soldier. His relationship with Fu Nanhua is similar to that of a preacher on the mountain. He has been in retreat for nearly 20 years. Once out of the customs, the Fu family may have an extra jade pure realm. If the city lord Fu Qi also successfully breaks through the realm, the Fu family can have 2 upper 5 realm cultivators at the same time. Zhu Sun pulled her husband's sleeves. His Royal Highness nodded with a smile, and showed her eyes that she shouldn't be too taboo. Then she asked softly, Master Fu, I heard that your Fu family is a hero, and she has a very good status in the family. Gao, even many women have served as city lord of Old Dragon City. Fu Nanhua laughed and said, It is true. Our Fu family never lays emphasis on boys, and outsiders may even think that we are not patriarchal. Zhu Sun really had a good impression of this gentle and elegant young city lord. Half of it is because of eyeballs, and half of it is because people compare people and shop around. Just talk about the Jinhu Kingdom, which ranks at the bottom of the top 10 dynasties. Today, the process of gaining the throne is not without twists and turns. It seems that it involves a battle between monks from other continents and local monks. In the end, the sect of Iazhao won. The local snake failed to overwhelm the dragon and the dragon. As a result, the first and second leaders of the Juqing Yamen, large and small, almost half of the important ministers in the capital of Jinhu Kingdom, were secretly named by this foreign sect, and the emperor was only responsible for issuing edicts. It is rumored that the immortal master of this sect was on the side of the Minister of Civil and Military Affairs of the Jinhu Kingdom. Later, it was a deputy head of Tianmu Academy, when Yu personally walked to Jinhu country, and the foreign immortal mansion, which was equivalent to the emperor of Jinhu country, converged a lot. Before long, there was an old Confucian who held the title of gentleman in Tianmu Academy, and a young sage named Yang Pu in Dafu Academy, who served as the Book of Etiquette and Shaoqing of Honghu Temple respectively. Soon there was the blessed land of the Jiang's cloud grotto of Yuguazang again. Somehow, he lent a huge amount of money without interest to the Jinhu country for no reason, and named him by name to let the Hongyu named Yang Pu. Si Shaoqing is responsible for all the expenditures of this sum of money. How can a Hongyu temple official manage the finances and taxes? Isn't it a mess? The Jinhu court had to temporarily set up a transitional official body of the Duji captain, which was regarded as Yang Puliang. Built. Yu Linyu whispered, I take the liberty to ask, the current state of Master Fu. If it's in the Yuaning realm, why not invite the other party to be a national teacher of the Yu dynasty? Fu Nanhua laughed at himself, ashamed, it's just the golden core. The only two golden immortals of the Qingzhou school, Gao Shuwen heard the words, expressionless and composed. Dai Yuan was sullenly cheated. Such a young golden core realm immortal said that he was ashamed, so now there are only 3 golden core realm cultivators. Who is the oldest? Longest stagnation. Anyway, it's not me who wears the plain. The mother-in-law surnamed Miao frowned slightly, and finally met the cold eyes of a maidservant with a sword beside Fu Nanhua. This Green Seal sect sister who is in charge of money only felt that her spine instantly became cold, and she immediately reduced her expression, and she didn't dare to make any trouble. The relationship between the two continents adjacent to the north and south has undergone earth-shaking changes. In the past, Aquarius Island, from the south, were all uncles. Today, Tonggishao, from the north, are all ruthless people. Fu Nanhua really didn't have that leisurely mind, and deliberately ridiculed the 2 old Jindan Gao Shuwen and Daiyuan. After all, compared to some of the monks of the same generation in the past, isn't he an old golden pill anymore? I think that among the group of people who traveled through the sky of Lizhu Cave, not to mention Zhang Yun, who is now a half-relative, but only the Kai Jinjian of Yunxia Mountain. At that time, regardless of the qualifications of cultivation and the harvest of opportunities, Fu Nanhua treated her condescendingly. Yes, as a result, even she is now Yuaning, not to mention that she had entered the Green Juniper Peak a long time ago, and she became the Yuaning, and even became the female ancestor of the Yunxia Mountain Ancestor Hall. But he has not even seen the bottleneck of the Golden Core realm. It was also fortunate that Yunxia Mountain could not be included in the sect. Otherwise, he would go there to congratulate him and meet Kai Jinjian again. Fu Nanhua didn't know what she could chat with. As for someone, let alone talk about it. Fu Nanhua was upset just thinking about it. From being unwilling at the beginning, to completely giving up, and then to chilling, in the end, I just don't want to think about it. It used to be such an ant-like juvenile mud leg. Fu Nanhua sighed faintly in his heart, and he couldn't bear to look back on the past. Since you can't bear to look back, let's look forward. I heard that Huang Zhongho, the master of the mountain peak of farming Yunfeng, made a great and wonderful work, which was tantamount to helping Yunxia Mountain to tide over the difficulties, so that the female mountain owner soon convened a meeting of the Patriarch Hall and passed a resolution, Huang Zhongho about to make an exception to be the new mountain owner of Yunxia Mountain with the Golden Core realm. He is also the first mountain owner of the Golden Core realm in the history of Yunxia Mountain. The Fu family has already received an invitation letter. Fu Nanhua will return to Aquarius this time and will soon go to Yunxia Mountain to participate in the succession celebration of the new lord. Fu Nanhua and Kai Jinjian are familiar with each other, and they have never had much contact with that drunkard, Huang Zhongho, and have never been the same. Now that several scenic spots have been visited, Gao Shuwen took people away, leaving only two groups of outsiders to chat. As the owner of the sword tree, Diyuan must of course continue to accompany the guests. Yu Linyu chatted with Fu Nanhua again and left with his wife. Before Fu Nanhua went down the mountain, His Royal Highness Prince Yu would definitely look for Fu Nanhua in private. Fu Nanhua smiled at Dayuan and said, "I'm here for the first time, and I don't know much about the Qingzhou school. I don't know what position Master Dai holds in your school now. Is it the Master of Discipline or the Treasury?" Dai Yuan replied respectfully, returning to the words of Master Fu, "I'm indifferent to learning and unbearable, but the High Head is so kind. Now in addition to managing the sword tree, there is also a green pearl well business, and I am also taking care of it." Of course, he didn't believe the other party's nonsense. Using the methods of the old Longqing Fu family, it was estimated that the details of his family's Qingzhou school, the 18th generation of ancestors, had long been touched. Fu Nanhua frowned slightly at first, seemingly puzzled, but quickly said, "I think it is the head of Gao who is worried that Daoist Dai has too many tasks and delays his practice." Poor Dayuan, a heart rises and falls again. Fu Nanhua asked again, "Then Daoist Dai is on Lujing's side?" Dai Yuan replied, "Thanks to your majesty, I am now dedicated to the insider." Fu Nanhua said, "I heard that the inside offerings of the Yu dynasty, although there is no hierarchical classification, but there is also an internal ranking." Dai Yuan cautiously said, "A total of more than 30 people, I am considered a middle and upper ranking. However, our high head is the second consecration, second only to the true guardian of Ji Zuiguan." Fu Nanhua gave a hum, and said casually, Dayuan's heart became hot all of a sudden. First there was Master Cui Xianshi, then Master Fu Xian, all of them were the ones who took the initiative to find themselves. Could it be the legendary double happiness? Ever since the place of right and wrong in the Taiping Mountain, I suffered from the disaster of innocence. Do you find a chance to go back to the Taipingshan site and worship the 3 sticks of incense? Looking back, it was a blessed place for me. After parting with Fu Nanhua, Diyuan walked out a section of the mountain road to Luzhujing, and found that Gao Bai seemed to be waiting for him halfway, so he had to pinch his nose and call the uncle. As Gao Pao's direct disciple, if he only talks about the generations, Diyuan really has to call the other uncle. But the problem is that there are mountain rules. Dayuan is a real golden core immortal, but the other party is only in the Longmen realm. Both parties should at least be equal. Even in a more disciplined school, the other party has to obediently obey the younger generation. As a result, this guy, relying on his being the proud disciple of Master Gao, and his status as a master, he still saw him on weekdays. Gao Bai asked with a smile, "Senior nephew Dai, looking at the complexion is really good today, is it going to retreat?" Master said to himself in private that this fellow Dayuan, unless his luck is extremely good and there is another chance outside the mountain, otherwise he will have to choose a child in the Golden Core realm in his life, so don't take it too seriously. Dayuan smiled and said, "Everywhere, it is said that golden pills are hard to find, and the bottleneck is even more invisible, but people are refreshed in happy events. At the end of the year, there is still a scene of blooming mountain flowers along the way." Fu Nanhua walked slowly back to the mansion where he was staying in the mountain. He habitually bowed his head and breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his head and rubbed his hands and said, "Ho Dao, next I am here. Went to Wuxi Academy to meet Ho Mian. I can only say that it is a try, and there is no guarantee of success or failure. It is not easy to persuade Ho Mian to return home to worship the ancestors." As a concubine, Ho Mian had suffered a lot of grievances within the family, and it was by no means the kind of trivial thing that he suffered from harsh words. If you change to Fu Nanhua, you will also choose to disassociate yourself from your family, stay away from each other in old age, and you will already be very magnanimous if you don't reconcile the old account with the Ho family. Ho Dao nodded and said, "Try it, if it doesn't work, then forget it." Ho Dao said helplessly, "If you were in Fuss family, you would definitely not have such a mess. It's not money or money, the problem is family style. Otherwise, our house family can't compare with Fuss background. Can you not get the money?" Fu Nanhua smiled and said, "You still have to tie the bell to untie the bell. If your grandfather is willing to show up in person and take the initiative to admit a mistake with Ho Mian, you will be more confident." Ho Dao felt helpless, he just shook his head, hiding for his holiness, and couldn't say anything. Every family has scriptures that are hard to recite. For the older generation, face is bigger than the sky. Fu Nanhua didn't discuss the matter, so he sprinkled salt on Ho Dao's wounds. He just said a meaningful sentence, "The whole family has saved today's wealth, because of this, and because of today's predicament, it is also because of this." Ho Dao sighed. Fu Nanhua smiled and said, "If you become the head of the family in the future, you will still have a chance to make up for it. After all, in the family back then, you and Ho Mian were the only ones with a bit of incense. When I went to Guanhu Academy, Ho Mian was the only one willing to mention it. The only Ho family is you." Ho Dao nodded, "As you just said, it makes sense for Ho Mian to become the deputy head of the academy." Before the old Dragon City, the Fu family and several common surnames, all transcontinental ferry boats, have been requisitioned by the Dali court, escorted by the water-walking dart, through Guishu, to the wild world. There are 6 ferry boats in total, the Osmanthus Island of the Fan family, the mountain and sea turtles of the Sun family, and the Fu family, in addition to the ancient treasure-swallowing whale, also has a floating mountain built by the Mo family, once known as the Little Upside Down. In fact, this was the embryonic form of the mountain boat of the Dai dynasty. However, all the big surname families in Old Dragon City, except the Ding family, seem to have an extra intercontinental ferry overnight. There was a gossip on the mountain that it was the handwriting of the Dali Song family, which was half sold and half given to you. To the Old Dragon City. Outside the Fu family, Sun Fang and Ho Ding Fan were all the surnames of Lao Longqing. After old Longqing lost that sea of clouds, the Fu family still had 3.5 immortal soldiers. In the past, the Fan family was regarded as a watchdog of the Fu family by the Ho family. But now in the entire Aquarius Island, who would dare to underestimate Fan's family, just because Fan Junmao, the sister of Fan Air, is a female monarch of Nanhua Mountain? It's enough to be on par with the Fu family. Now the Ding family is in the most difficult situation, because the biggest backer in the past was the direct descendant of the patriarch from Tonggizhao in the south, and even the close disciple of the patriarch master. As a result, the Ding family has experienced 2 changes. One provokes a martial artist from a foreign country, causing the entire Feishing city to fall into a huge vortex, and the other is the monk from another continent who is nominally half the son-in-law of the Ding family. The sect Tonggizong, from the old one who held the bull's ears on the top of a continent, has become such a field as it is today. This is the case with Tonggizong. What kind of storms can a so-called cultivator have? What's more, this person's preaching teacher also betrayed the Tongya sect and switched to Yuguizang. Instead of being the master of the next sect, he was like a stone cow entering the sea, and there was no news on the Shijianhu Zhenjingzong. It is said that Jiang Shangzhen did it. As a result, the Ding family became more and more embarrassed. Fu Nanhua laughed at himself. Compared with the superior and the insufficiency, it is more than the inferior. After a while, Fu Nanhua suddenly laughed in his heart. "Stay by my side, I'm wronged you." The handmaid said blankly, "It's a bad life, nothing can be done." Fu Nanhua choked for a while. This woman was an entourage and dead man who helped Fu Nanhua recruit before her father Fujian retreats. Fu Jian did not elaborate on her roots and feet. Fu Nanhua only knows that her name is Qing Tao, and she is a native of Zhongtu, but she followed her master and two senior sisters on a trip to Tonggishao in the early years. After the incident, she separated. She was ordered by her master to go north alone, and the master asked her to find someone. Qing Tao has never said her true age, but she has not concealed her strength from Fu Nanhua. She is not only a martial artist in the golden stage, but also a fighter in the golden core stage. In the eyes of outsiders, Qing Tao, the maidservant, stood beside Fu Nanhua, looking like Jia Yuhua next to her. However, Fu Nanhua always had the illusion that there was actually a piece of ice around him, which made people cold all over his body. At the end of the winter last year, Fu Nanhua encountered an elaborate and insidious assassination on his way home. It was the servant girl Qing Tao who took care of the assassin. From beginning to end, Fu Nanhua only needs to watch from the sidelines. The true foundation of the Qingzhou school lies in the mountain city known as the White Jade Cave Sky. There is a snow lake on the top of the mountain. The true half-fake Baiyu Palace, Qiangli Yuyu, is densely populated, and Shimon's divine predecessor can enter it only with the ancestors' Jinyuguan Pass. The opportunities continue. The contemporary leader Gao Shuwen got a fairy fate in the mountain city. However, Biyu Dongtian was self-appointed by the Qingshan school, and now it has a self-styled saying, Little Lizhu Dongtian. There was a thin young man squatting on the railing, with extremely long eyebrows, giving people a sense of cold and sharp edge. The young man from Shanzai Xiao had a licorice in his mouth at the moment. A knife was tucked under his armpit. Next to the railing, there was a tall old man who kept coughing. The boy spit out the chewed grass roots and asked, Old Han, the water from the green pearl well, really drinking a few sips can make the woman radiant, how old is it? The old man smiled, put his fingers together, tapped 2 acupuncture points lightly to stop the coughing. You can also believe if you lie. So if you call Long Tan, there must be no flood dragon. It is the descendant of the genus of the dragon, with an incorrect bloodline, and placed in the market, it is an alienation of the 5 clothes. The achievement of the road is limited, and it is hard to get into the golden core, even if it reaches the end of the road. You are a martial artist, you can see these mountain doorways with just a few glances. I haven't eaten pork, and haven't seen a pig run. The young man stared into the distance and asked, Lao Han, at the end of Qinghu Palace, is there really no Yuhua pill, or is he not willing to sell it to us? The old man laughed and scolded, Smelly boy, when you talk to others, you have to look into the eyes of the other person. I don't understand the rules and etiquette. I won't want to learn from me in the future. The boy still didn't turn his head, and said to himself, since the names of Fu Nanhua and Lao Longqing don't work, you just report your own name, Han Wanzhan of Jinjiazhou, the great master who fisted a continent. It can bluff people. Putting it in Tonggishao, Han Lauer, your status in the arena is almost equal to Wu Xing, right? Maybe even higher. The old man shook his head and said, I heard Fu Nanhua said that Lu Yong of the Blue Tiger Palace and Takashi Yamashita have always had festivals, and the grievances are not small, so we don't want to see us martial arts, let alone I am a foreigner, even if I submit my name. Lu Yong still wouldn't take it too seriously. The young man sneered and said, then they gave Pushun Yunkatang 2 furnaces of Yuawan for nothing. That Pushun Huang Yun, she died, he's just a back-to-the-ground martial artist who can beat you. The old man smiled freely, of course there was no suspense in the past. It's hard to say now. The boy frowned and said, can you still laugh? It's not a shame to lose a punch to a woman. If you hit the pay cup, who doesn't lose a punch? The old man stretched out his hand and patted the railing. Furthermore, the girl Jing, Yu from the Middle-earth God Island, the pure youth from Qingshan Mountain, the older ones, and the Lu Sueyu from the Iazhao Thunder Temple, they are all very outstanding female martial artists. Especially girl Zheng, that is, Pei Qian from Luopishan, I am very optimistic about her. The young man said in a bad mood, how many times have you been chanting about her? Do you bother me? The Wufu who was called Lao Han by his youth was the first person in martial arts in Jinjiazhou, Han Guanghu. In the early years, there was a shadow wall on the side of the knife room of the downhill mountain master, just like Zhang Bang wanted in the government office under the mountain, and the list of rewards was plastered. When Chen Pingan visited the upside-down mountain for the first time that year, he saw 3 familiar names offered as rewards. Embroidered Tiger Chui Yang, Mo Family Ranger Su Week, and King Song Changjing. Brother Chui Yang, there are as many as 6, and the reward is from 4 continents. It can be seen that the embroidered tiger back then was so unwelcome to see on Haoran Mountain. Su Chang and Song Changjing also have one, the former Zhangbang person who offered a reward, signed Lu Roshi, the Yuanjun of the Jingrong Lake and the Blue Water. As for the person who offered a reward for Dali Song Changjing, he signed Jin Jiazhou Han Wanzhan, which is the old Han in this young man's mouth. Han Guanghu smiled and said, Yu Bei Pingzu is really okay. Feng Shui is very strange. These years, the old man's face is crackling and it hurts. The young man's name is Jian Ming, he is from Bei Pingzu, and he was born in a small vassal country under the Zhuiying dynasty. However, the concise mountains and rivers of the old country were not broken by the monster army, but on the way to the south of the Dali cavalry in the early years. As one of the vassals of Zhu Ying's Dugu family, Shi Haogua, in order to block the Dali dynasty, wiped out all the elite troops. In the end, defending the capital, would rather die than surrender. However, the Dai dynasty did not target Shihao kingdom because of this. Instead, he treated Shihao kingdom quite preferentially and allowed it to be restored. After that, the Prince Han Jingling was enthroned. Concise gave himself a nondescript 3-character Taoist name, Yuren Song. He took out a piece of jade pendant from his sleeve and rubbed it lightly. The jade pendant is inscribed with the words Yunxia Mountain on one side, and a section of Dao Ju poems from Yunxia Mountain on the other side. It was the concise face of today's boy, and he accidentally picked it up in a snowstorm when he was a real boy at that age. A middle-aged man wearing a heavy cotton robe came from a distance, with a long sword dangling from his waist. Jian Ming immediately jumped off the railing, looked respectful, and called Mr. Zheng. It stands to reason that conciseness should call each other a master, but both the master and the apprentice have agreed that they should not be called each other outside. The middle-aged man nodded, walked to the old man, and looked at the scenery of Luzhujing. The knife held by Jian Ming's armpit was said to have been given to someone by Mr. Zheng in his early years and asked him to help retrieve it. If he can successfully retrieve the sword, he promises to accept him as an anonymous disciple. As a gift to accept the disciple, the knife was presented to Gao Jian. Therefore, Gao Jian traveled to Tonggishao on his own and took a trip to the Mirage city of the Daquan dynasty early on. Then, according to the agreement, after winning, waited on the Qingjing mountain. This knife is the famous knife lost from Yao Ling's hand, the important weapon of the Daquan dynasty, the magic knife, famous spring. Mr. Zheng, since I have arrived at Tonggishao, I still can't say why you called me here. The old man was a little impatient, gathered the sound into a thread, and asked the unidentified Mr. Zheng next to him. It has been more than 100 years since the two parties met last time, and his appearance has not changed at all, but the problem is that the other party claimed to be a pure martial artist back then. At this moment, Fu Nanhua on the road in the mountains, close to the maid, Ho Dao. Adding Han Guanghu at the top of the mountain, concise, this Mr. Zheng. This group of them is like a dinner, friends calling friends, more and more people. Mr. Zheng smiled and said, "Don't worry, wait a few more days." Han Guanghu remembered something and asked with a smile, is Ma Zhuxian really beaten by that young hermit? Mr. Zhang nodded. It's true. Han Guanghu curiously asked, is this big disciple of Pei Cup unhelpful, or is Chen Pingan too good? Mr. Zhang smiled and said, maybe there are both. Han Guanghu questioned, you seem to know this young man well. Mr. Zhang shook his head, it's not a good idea, but I handed it in once in the early years. At that time, I went to Aquarius Island to collect an old account, which was a coincidence. I remembered that there was a young man wearing a cyan cotton robe in Shihao country, where the wind and snow were all over the sky. Han Guanghu glanced at the long sword on Mr. Zhang's waist. If you want me to see, the 4 difficult ghosts on the mountain together are not as good as yours. The scabbard is real, but it is a blinding trick. The scabbard is actually a straight knife. This Mr. Zhang is a person on credit. Of course, it doesn't mean that people in the world who credit knives must have sabers. The reason why he knew about the hidden sword and the scabbard was that Han Guanghu had seen it with his own eyes when he was young. He had just started practicing boxing at that time and learned some tricks to embroider the legs. After Mr. Zhang appeared, he could really count it. After starting to practice martial arts, there was the later Jin Jiazhou Han Wanzhan, and the Wufu Han Guanghu who fisted a continent. Mr. Zhang smiled and said, I will treat you as a compliment. Han Guanghu asked, is the little girl next to Fu Nanhua the one who sneaked into the Yu dynasty Luo Jing and cut off the emperor's head? Mr. Zhang smiled and said, where she did it, it was her master's hands. Han Guanghu said, it's all strange people and strange things. Mr. Zhang nodded and said, since it is a big pattern that hasn't existed in 10,000 years, it must be the big fish that has burst out the net. Han Guanghu said, if you have the opportunity, you must see Chen Pingan's fist. How many caddies are there in the end? From the corner of his eye, Mr. Zhang looked at the conciseness of half of his apprentice, and looked into the distance again. Who is the rival of the world takeover? Chao Qin. Missing the moon and sparse the tongue, the wind blows and faints, the rustling ancient Mang, the mountains and rivers are in the same light. In the next moment, the world scene suddenly turned over like a copper coin, and there was no more sycamore tree. I saw a precarious young man in white, with a huge body, sitting cross-legged among a piece of golden leaves. His figure was like a lofty mountain, and the fallen leaves were like a golden sea. Young face, but very old look, especially a pair of eyes, one golden and white, like the sun and the moon hanging together. In contrast, the young hidden official wearing a bright red robe and Xiao Mo holding a mountain stick are like 2 mustard seeds floating on the sea. At this moment, Chen Pingan had 2 knives hanging on his waist, his palms against the hilt, and a night travel long sword, hovering to his side, looking up at the body that was the ancient existence of the Zhenyao Lu. I remember that in the wild world before, with the help of the 3 mountain talisman, I once passed by a Dayue Qingshan, as if the appearance of that mountain monarch was similar to the one in front of him. The Dayue mountain monarch with the Taoist name Biwu has 8-color pupils, draped hair, and a pair of straw sandals. I just don't know what the mountain monarch Biwu has to do with this phoenix tree. According to the earliest records of the Confucian temple, it is relatively simple. On the front of those old almanacs, certain existences between heaven and earth are roughly divided into 2 types, spiritual and weird. Xiao Mo gently rotated the green bamboo stick in his hand and smiled and said, friends of Daoist, the Dharma is so high, it makes my neck sore. This time, Xiao Mo was so easy to talk to when he was next to the sun. If it were 10,000 years ago, he would have tried to get to the bottom. In ancient times, how vast the world is, the territory is vast, and the 5 worlds added together, the territory is far from the previous scale. The number of human races is not worth mentioning in the early days. The so-called multiplication and spreading. Yi is just lingering and trying to survive. When the magic spells rained down on the world, monks of various backgrounds spread like weeds, and the human race, as the innately most suitable head of all spirits, is simply naturally born Taoist, so that almost all races want to become Earth. Immortal, through the two ascending platforms. If you want to be immortal, you need to be a human being in order to go far in the matter of cultivation. But Xiao Mo, who was born as a demon clan, was still one of the small group of Tao men standing at the highest point on the earth. It smiled, shrunk its figure, and became the same figure as the two uninvited guests. One pair of eyes returned to normal. It was dressed in a green robe. Only two sleeves were extremely long. It stepped out in one step, dragging two large sleeves, and straight. When I came to the edge of the golden fallen leaves, I stopped walking half a step forward, landed straight with my sleeves, and introduced myself, Dao Hao Qing Tong. It only saw the ascendant peak sword repairman with the yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo stick, squinting and smiling, Xiao Mo, Dao Hao Shizhu. Qing Tong glanced at the bright red robe. In addition to hovering a long sword, there was also Zhang Fulu, because Chen Pingan stayed in the last fantasy world for too long, and it was the 11th one. Qing Tong said with emotion, I haven't seen this kind of sudden talisman for many years. Chen Pingan said, suddenly Fu. Good name. According to the records of the Book of Pills, it is called the Baiju Gap Talisman, nicknamed the Moon Talisman. Whenever a talisman burns out, a white horse jumps and disappears in a flash. Qing Tong nodded and said, this talisman was created by Master Lu, the big talisman Wanyan bridge born out of Taoist ancestor, and it was named Sudden Talisman by Master Lu back then. At that time, Lu Qin had not yet traveled far to the Qingming world, and he was not the three masters of Baiyujing. He had been on boat for many years, and he once left the ship to land on Tonggishao, and made a special trip to visit the Zhenyao Lu, which is similar to Qin Pingan. On one trip, Lu Qin was on the way, and had nothing to do, so he drew this sudden talisman. It was just made of a talisman. It was extremely rare. Lu Qin used to draw a talisman with water. The water he used was the long river of time. This sudden talisman was made by Lu Qin. The threshold is high, one can imagine. The talisman hovering beside Qin Pingan was obviously simplified by a certain expert. The reason why Qing Tong could conclude that it was not made by Lu Qin himself was because Qing Tong was on the talisman and saw another true meaning of Taoism. In ancient times, the blue bird fluttered and had the reputation of carrying the blue sky. It traveled between the heaven and the earth and passed the edicts of the heaven, while the white horse only wandered in the long river of time. Qing Tong smiled and asked, how did you find me? When Chen Ping'an and Xiao Mo had just entered the Zhenyao building, Xiao Mo looked up at the sky. The sword fairy in Qingshan, who was walking behind Xiao Mo, looked down at the ground, and even stepped on the ground. The sight of the two of them is actually not wrong. One looked up at the real body of the sycamore tree, while the other looked down, as if with the long-lived Taoist in front of him, looked at each other, and said. Chen Pingan's voice was hoarse, with a slightly sarcasm, since you have a guess about my identity, do you dare to open your eyes and look down? Qing Tong started to move, but turned sideways and walked on the border between the golden fallen leaves and the Taishu realm, and curiously asked, how did you know about this? How did you know this? Chen Pingan sneered, isn't it me who came to ask you this question? The monks who finished this matter, apart from the Sanjiao ancestors who walked through the hometown together, I am afraid that only Lu Qin and Zhou Zi are the only ones. Zhou Zi certainly wouldn't have extra branches, and after Lu Qin left the Jianqi Great Wall, he had never been to Tonggishao, but went to Beipingzu and Beiju Luzhou. Xiao Mo was a little confused when he heard it, his identity. What kind of identity does the young man have that can make Qing Tong so jealous? Earlier, I heard this Qing Tong's tone is bigger than the sky, and he obviously didn't take the status of the hidden official of the Great Wall of Jianqi seriously. Is it related? It's just not right. If it really has something to do with that person, Qing Tong would still dare to push 3 things like this, so it's a mystery. Kneeling on the ground and kowtow, it's over, right? One of the 5 highest, sword bearer. What is a plane tree? Do you chop wood and make a fire for cooking? Then we have to talk about whether it is worthy or not. Chen Pingon smiled and said, Qing Tong guessed that I was the ancient co-lord of the heavenly court, that is, that the ancestors of the 3 religions were very jealous of. So that the Taoist ancestor made a special trip to the town and chatted with me all the way. This is the first time I have spoken to Xiao Mo. When Xiao Mo heard the words, he was silent for a moment. It is also normal, not right, that's the way it is. Chen Pingon did not expect Xiao Mo to reply. It is not without reason that Xiao Mo can be so brisk in Luopa Mountain. With this sentence, he can firmly rank in the top 3, which is enough to compete with the phrase, Master's realm cannot be doubled, by the founding disciple Pei Qian. This is how the young mountain master wronged Xiaomo to worship. After Xiao Mo banned some of his memories and emotions, he followed Chen Pingon to travel all the way. For example, in the big city of Lijing, Xiao Mo had a similar feeling for a long time. At that time, I felt that the son next to him was very much like the person he had seen with his own eyes. It's just because of the similarity that Xiao Mo didn't think it was possible before. It's specious. Of course, all similar people, things, and things are not real. But if the son next to him is really that person, Xiao Mo doesn't care, and even looks forward to it. 10,000 years ago, Xiao Mo did not hand over his sword because of his own swordsmanship and the inheritance of Dao Fa, coupled with some personal grievances, and finally chose to talk to the master of Bixidong Cave. That fellow Taoist was almost the same. Xiao Mo was watching from start to finish. If there is another ascent to the sky after 10,000 years, Xiao Mo is willing to follow the people around him and ascend together. After thinking about this, Xiao Mo suddenly looked so bright. How about using this uncommon phoenix tree 10,000 years ago to practice his hands? However, Xiao Mo didn't put this green tong in his eyes, so the bigger idea is to break the border, and he must quickly break the border. It is not enough to not be among the 14th realm. At the beginning, just looking up and adding Zhu Wei, you can make yourself helpless and return without success. Moreover, after 10,000 years, the number of monks in the 14th realm, combined with several worlds, can be said to be one of the few, but wait until there will be more Sanjiao ancestors, because it will be the biggest Daofu rainfall that has never happened before. Have you ever heard of a saying from Zhou Zi? Qing Tong asked and replied, I must have heard of it, and I have already thought about it carefully. With your always cautious disposition, you must have come prepared. It's the saying that only circulates on the top of the mountain. When the phoenix follows the sky and the breeze, the phoenix trees grow tall, the peach and plum spring breeze blooms, and when the phoenix dies and the autumn leaves fall, the simplicity conveys the truth, and then I see the early ancients. Chen Pingon said indifferently, I don't take it seriously. This is a sentence Xing Juzhong said, and it is very suitable for the situation when it is used here and now. Qing Tong didn't seem to have expected such a reply. He tilted his head slightly and looked at the famous Qing Shan guest. Haoren, savage, Qingming, lotus, colorful. Everyone knows this person's name. Qing Tong stopped, turned his head and asked, I have already answered the question, it's your turn. Chen Pingon said, riding a donkey to find a donkey is an obvious reminder. Qing Tong first arranged 2 donkeys for the 2 villains to watch the mountains and rivers on the donkeys. At that time, Chen Pingon and Xiao Mo seemed to say casually, if you come, you will be at peace. Where did you come? For example, there was once a supreme being, and occasionally he would follow 2 ascending platforms, pick up the level, and come to the world. In fact, this world has always been an extremely hidden downhill road. After that, many one-leaf blinds can be regarded as pediatrics compared to this matter. The sycamore tree was willing to guess so, and Chen Pingon also rode a donkey downhill at the time, and was happy to borrow the donkey to go downhill. On the one hand, Xiaomo marveled at the thoughtfulness of his son, on the other hand, he was slanderous. You've the sycamore tree, cultivated for thousands of years, and got the amulet of the Confucian temple. It has no natural enemies and no worries. In the end, you just have so many flowers' intestines. Qing Tong suddenly said, Chen Qing will pick you as the last hermit. It's not without reason. Xiao Mo reminded, Qing Tong, you still have to respect the boss sword fairy. Qing Tong was a little puzzled when he heard that. How come you, a monster sword repairman who used to fight Yuan Xiang and Long Jun to death, began to respect Chen Qing so much? This kind of hospitality is much more interesting than the younger generation strayed into the depths of the lotus root flowers. Chen Pingon tapped the handle of the knife lightly on the palm of his hand. For example, just talk about the first phantom world, and as far as the chess player can see, it is a brand new world. The scene of heaven and earth will change from a freehand ink painting to a delicate meticulous painting, and at the same time from a landscape scroll with only black and white to a green landscape painting. Later, I met the old lady in the mountains, which means there is a sky outside the sky, and there are people outside the world. Therefore, when Chen Pingon calmed down the old woman and the woman with a colorful cloud spectrum, there was a saying, is the chess of future generations already so high? Chen Pingon was really too lazy to betray the opponent, so he simply exposed the layer of window paper and said bluntly, if you want to come to a game like the world, you always go to a high place. Besides, Qing Tong has a deeper intention. Chen Pingon is the one, he is a chess player, so he can have the good fortune of having a glance, the world is born. At the same time, that one is an old woman and a woman who lives in seclusion in the mountains and does not care about the world. Instead, Chen Pingon has become another one for the future generations. The two meet again. The former treats the present world with strangeness. Sense. When Chen Pingon separated from Xiaomo and went to read on the official road alone, the pages were blank. Chen Pingon had a natural thought at that time, feeling that the way this phoenix tree creates the world is too crude and can only be regarded as a barren landscape. If you change to yourself, only dripping water will not leak. And this in itself is an ingenious temptation and subtle hint of Qing Tong. My youth can't do it. You can do it. It's just that Chen Pingon always feels unclear about the way, as if Qing Tong is in an extremely contradictory situation. He has long believed that he is the one, but he can't believe it, or he doesn't want to be the one. Chen Pingon, who was crouched, stared at the Qing Tong in the distance, and asked nonchalantly, what strength are you now? Xiao Mo knew it would be very interesting when he heard it. Because Xiao Mo knows that his son rarely confronts a senior on the mountain, and directly uses the word, you, as an opening statement. So next, it will definitely not be a point-to-point competition. Qing Tong smiled and said, it's probably equivalent to an ascendant realm, half a martial artist will arrive, and will know a few big charms. Chen Pingon nodded. Between the two, a long bright red line appeared in an instant, as well as a lingering speech. Then I don't have to worry about killing seniors. Sort of coming Chapter 925. Qing Tong, who was dragging his sleeves on the ground, was as if he was instantly shattered by a punch, and his body suddenly split into two. Qing Tong was no longer the extremely long sleeves and ethereal posture. A young Shen body appeared on the spot. He was an old man with a burly stature, his arms and muscles knotted, and his hair and beards were like snow, standing barefoot. The old man showed a slightly surprised face, his feet were on the smooth ground like a mirror, and he withdrew straight for several feet before stopping his figure and shaking his wrists. Only this subtle movement, which is not unusual, is like a dragon shaking its scales, a fist like a river flowing turbulently, and it shows a golden atmosphere visible to the naked eye. This old martial artist, who claims to be half a god, stands in the midst of incense like an immortal god. This Qin Tong, who has tempered his physical toughness to the extreme, seems quite surprised at the moment. A pure martial artist who has only a level of restraint and vigor, especially a 10-level martial artist who has fallen from the first level of return, is so big. Strength? Qin Tong's eyes were playful, and when he glanced into the distance, the night travel sword was still hovering in place. Obviously, it was a very pure questioning. That's right. Is it possible that a sword cultivator who is not in the Yupu realm needs to ask a sword cultivator in the ascended realm? It's not self-inflicted. Standing in a bright red robe where Qin Tong stood before, his sleeves fluttered, hunting and hunting, like the wind hitting his sleeves. Compared with Qin Tong's flowing fist and aggressive momentum, Chen Pingan's fist is extremely restrained. Qin Tong didn't rush to do it, anyway. He didn't need to find him by himself. This guy, who is neither a man nor a ghost, would come to the door obediently by himself. To put it bluntly, the realm gap between the two sides is there. Qin Tong can stand still and take dozens of punches. When that time comes, it only needs to return a punch, and it's over. Since the young man in front of him had no face, naturally he couldn't talk about the look and face. Qin Tong saw the other side bowed slightly. Here comes. Qin Tong squinted a pair of eyes, and slightly accelerated the speed of a mouthful of pure innocent energy in his body. After the mountains and rivers in the small world of the human body, there were bursts of anomalies, the thunder and lightning in the sky intertwined, and the mountains and rivers trembled. This is still Qin Tong's failure to truly rank among the gods, but it has a rudimentary form, to be precise, it's just an empty shell. Once Takeo is truly at the top of the legendary end, the flesh is a pantheon, and Takeo's pure innocence is the incense divine way that connects the heavens and the earth and leads to the temple. I am God. Qin Tong relied on the accumulation of water-milling efforts over the years, bit by bit, after a long time of fighting and physique, still has not laid the foundation, but can only use a clever shortcut to create an aerial loft. The opponent's close route is an arc trajectory, swiftly moving, and the speed is so fast, it is simply a white horse crossing talisman, the afterimage dragged out is like a fire dragon. Qin Tong still stood on the spot, just turned a little sideways, without evasive, stretched out a palm to resist the opponent's punch. Under the collision of fists and palms, the world resembled a huge sound of Hongzhong and Daliu, and behind Qin Tong's vast Taishu realm, suddenly there was an agitated and open ripples of fists, as large as a lake. Qin Tong grabbed the opponent's fist, suddenly lifted it up, and kicked it out. But Qin Tong had to change his mind, the hand that was always on the back, lightning went around in front of him, raised his hand to cover his face. Then he was kicked in the palm of his hand, and the back of his hand hit the front door heavily, and Qin Tong's figure fell back in an instant again. Qin Tong wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and there were faint tearing noises in the snow-white robe on her body. Standing again in the bright red robe in the original position of Qin Tong, one arm drooped straight, showing a penetrating twisting style. The shoulders moved slightly, the joints made a series of movements, and the whole arm quickly rotated, instantly returning to its original shape. The snow-white old man pulled the corner of his mouth and hooked his fingers. Come again. The figures of the two sides suddenly appeared and disappeared suddenly, and the two fisted together. There were countless afterimages, one bright red and the other snow-white, radiant, like 100 flowers. Qin Tong has deliberately never really fought back, just parrying. I took this opportunity to take a good look at how many kilograms a young hidden official who is about to be touted to the sky today is. Qing Tong looked calm, head tilted back, avoiding a swept whip leg, and his body leaned back slightly, but suddenly raised his arm, palm like a knife, and slashed away. The opponent's figure disappeared in a flash. Qing Tong put away his palm, moved one step horizontally, and instantly stretched out a distance of more than 100 meters, leaned one shoulder, and slammed the bright red robe away fiercely. Chen Pingan fell to the ground in the distance. Qing Tong sneered. After all, it was just a body of flesh and blood. Although there is not the slightest decadence, and it is far from the end of the strong crossbow, if Chen Pingan only has this speed and strength, then it is really difficult under the prestige. Of course, this kid must still have some killer tricks at the bottom of the box, and he hasn't displayed it for the time being. Qing Tong smiled and asked, "Do you want me to press down and feed the fist? Or is this guy satiated and braced, testing his martial arts level, physical strength, and skill?" Chen Pingan still did not speak. Qing Tong thought for a while, and began to take the initiative to move for the first time, a horizontal movement that was as fast as a thunder, and he left the place 10 miles in an instant. Unexpectedly, the bright red dress followed. Qing Tong's snack was startled, smiled slightly, twisted his ankles, and appeared again 10 miles away in an instant. Unexpectedly, the other party was still following, and Qing Tong rose up from the ground. A white rainbow swiftly lifted into the air, and his figure was nearly 30% faster. As a result, Chen Pingan still kept up, handed out a punch, and hit Qing Tong's eyebrows. He was replaced by a Jade Pure Realm practitioner, or a boundless Wufu. With this seemingly understatement, his head blossomed and he became a headless corpse on the spot. Qing Tong only turned his head slightly, and then slapped his opponent's forehead with a slap again. With a sudden force, with a bang, a bright red robe leaned toward the ground, and a huge depression was smashed above the mirror. It's just that when the opponent was knocked down, it was not completely useless. Qing Tong was a little annoyed, and put his fingers together, pressed one side of his cheek, and wiped off the blood. In fact, it's not an injury, it's just a bit embarrassing. Qing Tong said, "Strange things." The other party obviously didn't force a sigh of pure true energy, but was able to turn back at a faster speed and handed a punch to himself. Qing Tong tried to see the principle of this fist clearly, squinted his eyes, and for the first time showed a solemn expression, and began to carefully check the subtle flow of the fist, such as the trembling of the muscles and bones of the arm when Chen Pingan handed the fist. The qi and blood travels, the expansion of the meridians, the ups and downs of these mountains, and the rushing direction of the mountains and rivers fall in the eyes of the great master of martial arts. This kind of boxing theory and boxing technique hidden deep in the human body is the true foundation of pure martial arts. After receiving 5 or 6 punches, Qing Tong still couldn't see the way of his fist clearly, but vaguely felt that Chen Pingan's punch was profound and indescribable. All in one go. Because this punch is by no means a simple repetition of the same move. Just like the description and resemblance, the fundamentals are 2 characters, and there are always some subtle differences. The difference is 1,000 miles away. What's more weird is that the angle of Chen Pingan's punches and the posture are obviously different. But the flow of that pure innocence is like a river rushing to the sea, and the depth, width, and width of the river bed are the same. Responding to changes with the unchanging, the opposite is true, ever-changing, consistent. Just like this punch, the entrance to the sea where the destination is located is the same. Even Chen Pingan, who delivered this fist, had the same spirit of Chen Pingan, the same as the previous one, without the slightest deviation. This made Qing Tong not only surprised and shocked, but also a big surprise. Can boxing be practiced like this? Can you pass fists like this? After only a few dozen punches, Qing Tong realized that something was wrong. How did he feel that there was no end to this punch? Is Qin Pingan able to keep punching as long as he can hold it? The opponent not only superimposed his fists, but his figure in a bright red robe was getting faster and faster, tossing and turning, no longer losing to the shuddering mountains and rivers of an immortal. The fist did not fail, and Qing Tong had already blasted dozens of winter thunders. After the 20th punch, Qing Tong had to grit his teeth and retreat in one step. For the first time, he opened a serious old boxing frame, but it was very different from the current pile frame, with his fingers close together like a sword. Ju, the other hand, the 5 fingers pinched the 5 thunder Ju. Together with this fist, among the 7 orifices of the same green face, each of them shines with a bright light, like the rays of the Beidou and Chiao. When hushing, it is like a thunder in the wild, and the fist is shot out in no time. Exchange punches with Qin Pingan. But still unable to interrupt the opponent's continuous punches, Qing Tong took another 5 punches one after another, but Qing Tong didn't idle either, hesitated slightly, only returned Qin Ping's 2 punches. He really doesn't believe in evil anymore. Qin Pingan is an imposing martial artist, with a physical toughness. You have suffered 6 punches in total. Adding Qin Ping's fist, handing the fist itself will damage the Wufu's physique. I'm really not afraid that if I didn't fall, you would fall again. Falling from Guasian is still in the 10th realm, but if it falls from the end to the top of the mountain. Qing Tong's 7 orifices all seeped blood, and it looks hideous, but the injury is not serious. However, the body is small and the movement is not small. A black dragon born from the aftertaste of pure qi lies on the top of a mountain. When it rains and steams, another key acupuncture point, purple sky rises. Among them is a big white snake as a dragon, flat square, above the huge head, a golden thunder seal carved on a white jade square like a character seal, looming. This is the great advantage of the Qi trainer and the martial arts. As long as you pass the golden body, the 2 thresholds of the end, the sky, and many methods, you can cast a furnace and complement each other. It is difficult to distinguish between the magic and the fist. Don't. The eyes of the tall old man once again had a vision, 1 golden and 1 silver, shining brightly, but the vision was fleeting. At the same time, between Qing Tong and Qin Pingan, an imperceptible ripple appeared, like a mirror, blocking Qin Pingan. Wearing a bright red robe in the mirror, his punches are exactly the same as Qin Pingan outside the mirror. The person in the mirror is like asking Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan hardly needs to think about it, just closed his eyes, the mirror disappeared instantly, and the mirror was shattered in the next moment. But the strange thing is that the self behind the mirror, that punch is not an illusion, but a real punch that continues to be delivered, but the route remains the same, which is slightly rigid. Without any hesitation, Qin Pingan speeded up the movement of the pure innocent energy again, his fist swelled up a bit, and his figure suddenly speeded up. For the first time, he used his left hand and wiped the self with a hand knife. Turn your head. Qing Tong, who had already withdrawn from the battlefield far away, couldn't help but curse. He was so young that he was really hard-hearted. It's right to think about it. At any rate, it is a sword repair that has grown step by step on the battlefield in the bones of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Qin Pingan stopped abruptly, hovering in the air, his figure rickety, his icy eyes flickered, and he continued to maintain the spirit of beating the drums. At the same time, he looked around and saw that Qing Tong retreated at the same time he set up a handle. In the mirror, the dozen or so of themselves wearing bright red robes are still in the posture of the previous punch, rushing from all directions to Qin Pingan, who is located in the central area. The people are fake, but the punches are real. I just don't know how long these self can maintain the mirror. Qin Pingan said silently in his heart, his bright red figure resembling a flower blooming suddenly. In fact, he chose the most inferior method in Qing Tong's eyes, as if he was an enemy of himself, and he was also fist to fist. A dozen mirror images were shattered and sputtered almost at the same time, frantically scattered in all directions, and finally the sky was like a bright red rain. For the first time, Chen Pingan spoke with a hoarse voice, as if a grindstone and a knife were mutually forcing each other, and said in a deep voice, "The two sides ask the fist and learn the fist with the fist. But if you are a monk, you can move out of the mountain by means of skill. Fake this fist. I advise you not to do this." Although these quirky mirror images that can imitate Qin Ping's and Quan Yi for a moment are extremely mysterious and look more like some kind of magical powers of a Qi practitioner, but they are indeed a kind of boxing move. It's just that Qing Tong is outside here, and sneaks a little hand and foot. Qing Tong squeezed out an expression that was not smiling, and was somewhat embarrassed to be exposed by a junior on the spot of this unglamorous activity. "I can't hold back one, I will stop there." He already had the innate advantage of a higher realm, and also used magic techniques to steal punches, which was indeed a bit outrageous. Obviously, Qing Tong is still very relaxed in this questioning fist, and that masterful attitude with ease is not a fake. The only problem was that Qing Tong found that Chen Pingan, who had not missed his punches, still seemed to be bottomless. Fong Kai-ching had the 3 punches, although he was far from trying his best, but it fell on the ordinary grandmaster, especially the pure martial artist outside of the monster clan. How could he be half dead? Or is it because the young hidden official with this attitude can't see anything unusual on the surface? What's more, Qing Tong couldn't help but whispered a little bit. Just now the two sides exchanged punches so dangerously. This kid can actually separate extra attention and pay attention to all his subtle movements. Qing Tong smiled and said, "The blank world is too boring, so I will set up a battlefield for fun." In the blink of a finger, a city that appeared out of thin air, covering a vast area, might be comparable to the capital of the first dynasty of China's divine continent. Qianglu and Yuyu are lined up in the city, and the city is dotted. Outside the city, there are still mountains stretching, rivers are thousands of miles. There is still a mountain rising suddenly in the plain area. The lonely mountain is high, and the sea of clouds is the belt. Qing Tong stood on the ridge of a large hole. After holding one hand, he spread out the palm of the other hand. "Chen Pingan, I will only accompany you to play incense sticks. The implication is that you are ready to make a serious move, not to help feed your fists anymore." Seeing the violent but pitiful young man, Qing Tong sneered. If the other party had not been a hermit and had the title of a disciple of Wen Guanmen, he was a meritorious person who took great care of the Confucian temple, and there was also that Xiao Mo goes with him. You can't even see my real body today, let alone the previous fist that couldn't fight back. If you lose the fist at the end, Chen Pingan should give up and leave obediently. In the future, both sides will go their own way even if the well water does not offend the river. I won't delay your checking and filling in the vacancies in Tonggishao, but don't bother me either. Of course, that kind of impulsiveness, why move half of the Great Wall of Jinchi here, this kind of detrimental activities that hurt the enemy by 1,800, and hurt others and disadvantage oneself, don't do it. Qing Tong's momentum changed completely, with a little tiptoe, and the hall under his feet was overwhelmed, instantly turning into dust and dust. After the active punch, the bright red robe was used to block his hands, and the whole person was on the ground in the city. Later, a huge gully was cut in the city with his back. The white-haired old man appeared on the street, walking by the gully, strolling leisurely in the courtyard, and asked in a leisurely manner, "Chao Ci, and you were in the Gonglan questioning session, he must have reserved it, specifically, how much strength he kept." The reason for this question is that it is not that Qing Tong is deliberately disgusting, or that he looks down on Chen Pingan's martial arts realm. To be able to compare with Chao Ci is a kind of high-level look in itself. Nowadays, it is not only Howran world that thinks this way. In fact, except for Feishing City, which is the only one in the colorful world, the other 4 worlds have such a view. Chen Pingan jumped out of the gully, and his robe was still slender and dusty. The next movement made Qin Tong want to laugh when he saw it, but Chen Pingan, who fell to the ground with a punch, jumped slightly, as if stretching his muscles and bones. However, Qin Tong didn't laugh too much soon, not jealous of the other party, but a kind of anger. Because Qin Tong, who claimed to know a few big amulet, saw the bright red robe around, first the flames flickered and dotted, and then turned into ashes and floated away. It was the scene where dozens of talismans burned all at the same time. Relying on the aura of the remnants of the talisman, Qin Tong, as an ascending master of the talisman, quickly deduced the common effects of the 2 talismans. Used to slow down the body, not only increase the burden on the hands and feet, but also defeat the martial arts body with the body of a monk. In the final analysis, this guy deliberately slowed down his punching. Qin Tong has seen someone who is sharp and arrogant, and he has seen someone who is arrogant, but it is the first time he has encountered someone who is so young and dare to be so big. Do you want to die? It seems that the other party guessed Qin Tong's mind. Although there was no word, Qin Tong also guessed the other party's mind. I can't beat seniors to death, but can you beat me to death just as a martial artist? I don't think so. Qin Tong nodded, and it was not without reason that he hated these sword repairs. Especially a swordsman who practiced boxing and martial arts, young swordsman. Previously, Xiao Mo didn't want to stay in place and get in the way, so he flew out for more than 100 miles, sat down cross-legged, and put the green bamboo staff horizontally on his knees. As a trainer of Qi, Qin Tong is a soaring realm, not much stronger. Otherwise, if I met myself before, this young fellow would not close the door to thank guests and just rush people. The only thing that Xiao Mo is more interested in is the so-called meeting a few big symbols at the end of Qin Tong. There is no definite number for the weight of his own son's fists and feet. The first level of realm is the so-called discussion in the general sense. There are 2 kinds of them. One is to suppress the realm, the pressure is divided into several realms, and the other is to not suppress the realm at all. Then the second level of realm needs to be distinguished, such as the previous questioning boxing with Pushan Huangyun, erasing the half-caddy talisman on the hands and feet. However, the spectators who watched the game at that time still had not enough realm. On the contrary, it was Xiao Mo. Although he did not appear on the Zhanqian Peak, but on the Tsingyi River Luobao Beach, Xiao Mo was still careful. In fact, the sun did not erase it at the time. Of all the talisman, there are still about 2 to 30% of the talisman left, which is used to suppress the speed of punching. It's just that Chen Pingan moved too fast, something happened in an instant, so even Yi Yunyun didn't take it seriously. The last is the current state, which is divided into 2 types. This needs to involve Chen Pingan's mentality. In the end, it is to divide the victory or defeat with others, or to decide life and death. Chen Pingan and Chao Si's questioning punch from Gongdalan to the canopy of the Confucian temple was probably the penultimate type. Although both sides had reservations, there was a gentleman's agreement privately, each of which kept 20% of their strength. Under this premise, the questioning boxing was a hearty and heartfelt fight, each dedicated to their efforts. Step by step. Each step has a different landscape. So today, here and now, Chen Pingan is the last gesture. Xiao Mo raised his eyes and looked over. On the battlefield, the sun punched out, still pleasing the eyes as always. Xiao Mo suddenly remembered something, but he just didn't know if the Pushan Yunkatang family, who was a Qi trainer, could also take into account martial arts, whether it had no relationship with this phoenix tree, or whether it was a kind of Qin Tong. Open branches and loose leaves. In the distance, there was a small path out of thin air, covered with golden phoenix leaves, spreading towards Xiaomo like a spirit snake. Qingtong was previously divided into two, without seeing the real body. The pure martial artist outside the body of the Yang Xin is asking Chen Pingan, and the Yin Xin is traveling far away. Walking on this small road, he is a handsome young man. You are better than a beautiful woman, a Guanbo belt, very good-looking. Wearing a meticulously refined robe, the real thing is wearing the stars and wearing the moon. On the snow-white robe, there are faintly starlight visions, and a round of precious light and moon phases appear behind him. When Qingtong's Yin Xin stopped and was only a few steps away from Xiaomo, twisted his fingers, lit a stick of incense, and started timing. Qingtong smiled and reminded, within 3/4 of an hour, if Chen Pingan can't win me, it's about to see off the guests. Xiao Mo nodded. When the time comes, you will see off your son, and I will see you off. This youthful Yin god, sitting cross-legged, accompanied Xiao Mo to look at the arena, and exclaimed, "It is very lucky to be reunited with fellow Taoists for 10,000 years. Don't come here without any problems." Youth, whether it is the content of the words or the tone of expression, has an old-fashioned meaning. It's just that in the eyes of Xiao Mo, his body is too rotten, and he has no reason to think of an unknown Taoist friend he met on the journey in the past years. 10,000 years ago, 100 flowers blossomed, the sky was high and the earth was wide, unfettered, and the least lack of strange people strange thing. Xiao Mo put away some distracting thoughts, smiled and said, "Of course it is lucky for you." Qingtong was silent for a moment, and laughed at himself. It's like chatting the sky to death all at once. Because of the implied meaning of this fellow Daoist Shizhu, you have survived by luck, and I can live to this day by my true ability and swordsmanship. Thousands of years ago, even the so-called earthly immortals and ilk of the so-called Taoist scholars were of similar realm, high or low skill, and strong or weak, but they were different from the mud. Jian Xiao is a well-deserved first-class Taoist. In the world at that time, like this ancestor of the phoenix tree, it was still just normal, indeed, very normal. The reason is very simple, just talk about the vegetation. If the ancestors of all kinds, can you count them? Just talk about how many mountains, rivers, and vegetation on Earth were destroyed by the water-fire dispute. Countless. It's like Xiao Mo, who once passed by the tree and just looked at it a few times. This is only because the tree was scorched in a big fire without dying, and the dead wood was rejuvenated in spring. On this visit, if Xiao Mo wasn't by his side, fellow Taoist. Just a polite word. What kind of friendship is the Tao? The two parties are neither friends nor on the same road. Therefore, this long-distance reunion after 10,000 years is like a son of a wealthy celebrity, sitting and chatting with an upstart who is suddenly wealthy. Qingtong shook his head and said, "If you can become a sword repairman, isn't it a kind of great fortune that you have never missed? Look again at our genus of flowers and plants, no matter how lucky, even if the refining is successful, which one will become a sword repairer? At the beginning of practice, resuscitation is not easy. It is the most difficult part of the spiritual beings. Just refining the form, not to mention that compared to the human race, only to say that it is better than you, there are Yuanshou, Yangji, and the like, we are more than twice the result with half the effort. Before the training was successful, and because of the inability to move, in the face of all kinds of sudden natural and man-made disasters, otherwise the torso would only talk about the rudimentary Taoism and the suffering you suffered. Those who are blessed on the road of spiritual practice, don't understand. Floods and floods, fires burning mountains, golden warfare, violent storms and rains, many disasters, and so on. Many of your 3 or 2 years of effort seem to be achieved overnight, and it is often the height of the road that we can't find in our lives. In the end, Xiao Mo said, "I know what this does." Qing was choked at the same time. This is the stinky virtue that has been sword repaired and will not change for thousands of years. Xiao Mo glanced at the incense stick, and asked, Hafa has arrived. Is there such a saying as today in the martial arts? Qin Tong smiled and said, a person who travels 100 miles is halfway to 90. So Qin Tong didn't talk about his martial arts realm, but he was sincere and sincere. Xiao Mo noticed the change in the other party's heartstrings, and sneered, the real body dare not come here to talk about the old, so what kind of sincerity is there? Of course, Qin Tong is very clear about one of this fellow Taoist's destiny, and it doesn't matter if Xiao Mo will notice this little noise, but he still joked, friend Haizhu, follow the young hermit to travel the world for so long. It's time to hear the phrase, don't listen to indecent assaults. This fellow Taoist who was called Xiaomo by Chen Pingan, as one of the ancient great monsters who moved the world, of course has a real name, Mingyu. It is the same pronunciation as the later spider. It's just that these two characters are too uncommon, and as the years have changed, there have been several changes in fonts. Nowadays, in addition to the book Shuwen Jiezi, there are also a few sentences similar to, spread silk into a luo, make a net for food, profit in the sporadic records of, in the night, everything else has become a passing moment. Qin Tong knows a lot of feats about Shemo. Apart from cultivating swords with swords and being good at catching and fighting each other, he once set up an ambush on one of the tracks of the Tian Dao. In those 2 rounds of the sun and the moon, cyclically rise and fall, Xiao Mo will capture it, besieging it in the net. First swallow the bright moon, then catch the big sun, swallow the round of bright moon in the belly, has already begun to refine, making great movements. The bright moon the co-owner asked the blue bird to spread the word of the heavenly thunder department, and then spread the word to the world, to the demon sword repairman who violated the sky to an execution platform to ask for the execution. How could Xiaomo wait to die and suffer a lot of Dao Tian Lei? Also handed a lot of officials and gods under the Lei Department Swordsmanship Division, and there are not a few human earth immortals attached to Lei Department. Anyway, this Ascendant Sword Repair Demon clan with both offensive and defensive capabilities will kill one if they encounter one. When you meet a group, kill a group, that escape is simply a sword and practice. In the end, the heavenly court was furious. It was rumored that not only was one of the 12 high-level gods of the Lei Department's chief official, he wanted to capture Xiaomo in person in the lower realms, there would also be another high-level counterpart, but I don't know why, but in the end it was a result of heavy thunder and little rain. Nothing more. But after that, Xiaomo also continued to converge. Of course, the so-called convergence was much. Compared with the previous lawlessness, rampant and unscrupulous, he accidentally bumped into the Earth Fairy in the hands of this great demon sword repairer, and ended up very badly. Miserable. To be honest, Qin Tong saw Xiao Mo again this time. The latter was so restrained, so implicit in the sword, it was surprising. Xiao Mo asked, why do fellow Taoists have prejudices against me? Qin Tong asked in doubt, when did I have a prejudice against you? Xiao Mo stretched out his hand and patted the green bamboo stick, smiled and said, you don't have a big prejudice against Jian Shou. My Xiao Mo is Jian Shou. Qin Tong laughed dumbly and remained silent for a long time before revealing his heart. You swordsman, you can break the 10,000 magic with one sword, with your eyes above the top, unruly and bloodthirsty. You only care about your own swords, and you don't care about the world. Life and death, to treat the practice of the world's Taoists, dismissive of them. Xiao Mo nodded, not denying this fact, and asked with a smile, have you ever suffered in the hands of Jian Shou? Qin Tong's face was gloomy when he heard the words, and it was obvious that an old thing in his mind was definitely not a happy thing. Xiao Mo thoughtfully said, if you don't want to say it, don't force it. Not a person who likes to listen to bitter words, nor is he willing to listen to that last words. Qin Tong's body doesn't move at all, only twisting a piece of sycamore leaves with his fingers, like a wooden fan. Qin Tong slowly said, "Years ago, 3 young sword repairers traveled together. During this period, they had a dispute with a group of armored men who patrolled the world. Unfortunately, I was close to the battlefield and the road was damaged a lot. Those 3 young men later became the pinnacle of the human race, and it was Yuan Xiang, Guanzhao, Long Jun." Qin Tong raised his hand and wiped his cheeks with 2 fingers. A series of small words appeared on his face, as if he had been tattooed. He was tattooed on his face. Xiao Mo glanced at it. It was the ancient text, which roughly meant to record the great feats of the fight. He nodded and smiled. It was something Yuan Xiang did. Because that Yuan Xiang has a detached temperament and domineering, and has always been the cheapest. For example, going to Luobayan to steal wine is also done in Yuan Xiang. I endured it once or twice, and there was even a 3rd time. The point is that after Yuan Xiang finished drinking, he still said it was not good. Xiao Mo doesn't chop who he chops. Only in the later battle of ascending to heaven, Yuan Xiang was also one of the human sword repairmen who went to death most generously. Even before Yuan Xiang died, he could not see the gate of the old heaven. It is rumored that this person was fighting on the way to the sword. This old sword repairer took the lead in ascending to the sky, getting higher and higher, except that he kept handing his sword, and the sword light was magnificent, and the sword repaired himself, silent and silent, as if he had never stopped. 3-character last words of the opening. I die first. To die resolutely is for the martyrs. Xiao Mo asked, except for this personal grudge. Qin Tong sneered. Later, there was a last sacrificial officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, who was sneaky, and he had been here before, and I still had a very unpleasant chat with me. After this person quietly left the Great Wall of Jinqi, he did not go straight to the Lizhu Cave of Aquarius Island, but landed on Tongya Island first. Qin Tong once said a few words that were close to each other, and ended up with a similar fate with a hot face and a cold butt. Of course, this is not the most important thing. There are other reasons why we can't agree. It's just that there is no need to talk about it with Xiao Mo in detail. After that, there was a young man from outside the town who was not yet a sword repairman. From Fuzhong to the land of Tonggishao, he carried a long sword called Sword Chi Chang at that time. It is Chen Qingdi's saber that has been abandoned for many years. Just like the old sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, clearly separated by a world, he just warned Qin Tong to protect the road for the young man without being conceited in such a way that he didn't need to go out himself. You're Chen Qingdu, even if the young man named Qin carries the sword, it's okay to give me a word. Or with some easy little secret technique, you Chen Qing would say hello secretly to me. How difficult is it? Back then, among the many human sword repairs, Chen Qing was not the best in aptitude, the speed of cultivation was not the fastest, and the rank of flying sword was not the highest, but it was this person in the end who reached the highest point of swordsmanship. Moreover, Chen Qing is regarded as one of the best reputations compared to the defiant sword repairs of all ethnic groups. He has always been reticent and never causes trouble. He only practices swords diligently, rarely goes out and travels, and has a handful of long trips. Only a series of facts later proved. Those who have always been silent occasionally speak with thunder. Xiao Mo tut and said, "My fellow Daoist, what's the matter with you? Is it congenital inconsistent with Jian Shou?" Qin Tong was noncommittal about this. Looking at the battlefield, he asked curiously, "Are you not worried about Chen Ping'an at all?" Xiao Mo was silent. The sun is thoughtful and does not need outsiders to worry about. Now Xiao Mo's only thought was to think about how to persuade the sun after the fact to allow himself to express his sword in pain. Not talking about his status as a dead man, only talking about obedience, they are almost incompetent. Coming to Tongisao, especially after entering this place, Xiao Mo knew something a little bit. No wonder Tongis's Kendo Chiyun would be the least among the Hauran 9 continents. Regardless of the total number of sword repairs or the number of top sword repairs, this Tongisao can be called shabby. Of course, it is not to say that Qingtong's natural rejection of Jianxiu can completely dominate the situation, creating a bleak pattern with a small number of sword immortals in front of him. Qingtong is a phoenix tree, and he really doesn't have this capability. Just because it sits on a continent of mountains and rivers, it is imperceptible. Over time, the accumulation of less and more, the upward and downward effects, the impact is far-reaching. In the end, the entire Tongisao, the sect, the monks, the hearts of the people, the time and the place, and the people began to tend and deviate, forming an active choice. And the non-moving nest of a phoenix tree, and the closure of the entire Tongisao, like to close the door and sit in the well to watch the sky, it can be regarded as a kind of invisible avenue fit. Generally speaking, it is a simple old saying that it is not that one family does not enter a family. Daoist Bixiao Luobaotan is like the head of the family behind the scenes of Tongisao, and of course, there is also the matchmaker in front of the stage, Qingtong, to maintain this family business together. It's a pity that this fellow Bixiao Daoist has already gone to the Qingming world. Otherwise, the sun will be a lot smoother in Tongisao. The Azurine god, while watching the battle, stretched out his hand to roll up a strand of hair on his temples, looked at the dust of the city, and asked with a smile, "Isn't he worried about his safety at the moment? Before, I only used the friendship of the landlord, which was a treat for Chen Pingan, and the young hidden official was about to relax." Qing Tong pretended to turn his head and closed his eyes, not looking at the plowing scene after the scarlet robe was knocked down the street. If you take the initiative to punch, your son will be helpless. A stick of incense, 3/4 of an hour, will it be too difficult? If Qin Pingan fell into a state by accident and was carried back to Xianda Mountain to participate in the Zongmen ceremony, wouldn't it be great? The old talent who had not been restored to the Confucian temple for a long time, would he be reluctant to take care of himself, fake his own business for his own sake, and avenge his personal revenge? In fact, the most jealous of Qingtong nowadays is not someone else, it is the literary sage of the 3 continents. Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Only embroidered pillows who have not played a few games, and who have not really experienced the battle of life and death, will ask this idiot question." Then Xiao Mo added, "I'm sorry, I'm just discussing matters, not aiming at fellow Taoists." Qingtong chuckled. Not underestimating the enemy, but at a certain height, after all, there are still upper limits and bottlenecks. In particular, Chen Pingan traveled through the barren world, and fell into a descent. Otherwise, even if it is Chao Ci who is on his way in the martial arts, if he is only a layer of vigor and travels to this point, what can he do to the pure martial artist who has reached the top half? Before that, Chen Pingan was at the gate of the Tapingshan site in Tongisao, where he was on the first level of dynamism, and he was the strongest before he went to the mountain. The momentum was great, the movement was great, and Qingtong's ears and eyes were well versed, and he was aware of it at that time. It's just that Chen Pingan and Han Yushu of the Wanyao sect of Sanshan blessed land at that time, one relied on the magical powers of the flying sword, and the other relied on the talisman to form a small world. Qingtong did not dare to explore wantonly. Sitting there is Jiang Shangzhen from Yuguizang. The territory of Tongisao is very large, almost equivalent to 2 Aquarius continents, but the phoenix tree has been rooted here for thousands of years, just like in the depths of the earth, the fellow Shizhu Taoist learning that beside him has formed a spider web. A continent with vast mountains and rivers, ordinary wind and grass, don't need it to know, it doesn't bother to know, but as long as it is the kind of people and things that can make its heart tremble, Qingtong cherishes its own behavior, public and private. We'll try to find out. For example, the stinky bull nose of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea had shot the sword-backed old ape. It knew it, but did not dare to mix it up from beginning to end. After all, Qingtong still has the identity of a town demon building, but there is no rest. Zhenbei's, inside the 8 male town buildings, was so straightforward. 14 realm monks are extremely rare at first, and count them, adding up a few worlds together, the mountain tops are just a handful. And this very old veteran master is also the most famous among this small group of mountain monks on earth, the most notoriously unstable temperament, treacherous mind, and brilliant means. Known as the most proud scholar in the world, Bai Yi, holding a fairy sword, is undoubtedly the most powerful. The undefeated golden body of the monk Shenqing is the first, and it is also recognized by several people in the world. And the old Guanzu's supernatural powers are vast, seemingly untouched, but since he can share the same fame as the old blind man of the Shirwan Dashan mountain, Bai Yi and Shenqing, the two 14-realm great monks, Qingtong has seen it with his own eyes, heard it with his own ears, and even experienced it in person. Just to talk about one thing, there are a few cultivators in the world who have been asking with Taoist ancestors for thousands of years. And this Bishao cave master, who once claimed to be invincible from the cave, able to forgive others and not forgiving others, and now the little Mo in the yellow hat and blue shoes, is an extremely good fellow Taoist. This was a thing known to the world and the immortals thousands of years ago. It is a kind of incense that can't be desired and envied. It's not who clings to each other, it's just a kind of congeniality between the strong and the great agreement. Thinking of this, Qingtong couldn't help sighing, "Little stranger, with your realm and identity, you can't go anywhere. Why don't you go to heaven and practice your sword, slowly get out of the 14 realms, and then return to the world?" Xiao Mo turned his head when he heard the words, stared in a daze, and asked, "You can call Xiao Mo too?" Qingtong was silent for a moment. As I said before, it was Chen Pingan who was more serious in killing, not this ancient sword repairer who used the Zizudo name. But at this moment, it was instantly upside down. It was just that Xiao Mo quickly ignored Qingtong, because Chen Pingan removed all fullus on the streets of the city for the first time. Seeing this scene, this Qingtongian laughed suddenly, as if he couldn't help it. At first there was a bit of restraint, and then the laughter became irresistible. After all, he finally stopped his smile and lowered slightly. Head, stretched out a finger, wiped the corners of his eyes, laughed intermittently, straightened his face, coughed a few times, turned his head and said to Xiao Mo, I'm sorry, I really feel funny, I can't help it. Forgive sins and forgive sins." Xiao Mo didn't feel angry when he exposed this kind of heartfelt emotion to Qingtong. If you talk about the previous questioning boxing in the blank world, both sides are practicing, warming up, and discussing. So now in that city, both sides of the confrontation are beginning to show some real skills. When the burly old man handed his fist, he unintentionally exposed a section of his arm, and dense golden talisman characters appeared on the top, which were actually engraved on the bones under the muscles. The content of the text includes an article on the Taoist art of the immortal family, of Buddhist classics, and various long-lost ancient runes. Qingtong's entire arm is like being refined into a mountain of white bones, and on the cliffs, there are countless inscriptions on the cliffs, like fairy talismans, which are used to toughen the mountain and stabilize the peaks and mountains. In the end, one arm is a dragon vein. In addition, the flesh and veins of the skin, on the contrary, look like some dispensable vassals. A bright red robe was smashed into a tall city wall, his elbows opened the gravel, and he forcibly pulled himself out of the wall. However, Chen Ping's forehead and chest were hit by Qingtong in succession, but he did not hit the iron while it was hot, because Qingtong, who had the upper hand in exchange for 2 punches, noticed that Chen Ping's punch was unusual. This punch is not too heavy, but the box is quite difficult. There are several key chi palaces in Qingtong's body, and the movement is not small, and on the arm of the seal-carved talisman, there are hundreds of golden characters and a few talisman pictures. Became dim and dull almost instantly, falling like ash and rustling. After that, Qingtong became more cautious. A touch of bright red wandering in the streets, a white rainbow will be much sharper, all in a straight line, straight to the bright red robe that looks like a fish scurrying, and the buildings are broken and exploded along the way. Once it is caught by Qingtong, if he succeeds, Chen Pingan often smashes hundreds of feet, just like cutting out a door in a city. On the other hand, Qingtong, even if he gets a punch, is mostly staggered, and he will soon return to Chen Pingan. Take color. The only thing that was wrong, Qingtong found that Chen Pingan, together with the previous boxing move that could break the golden talisman, was always repeatedly using 5 boxing moves, like a kind of temporary holding Buddha's feet, from the earliest a little strange to the gradually proficiency. Growth in fist cannot be said to be a rapid advance, but with the same eyesight, it can be said that the change of the opponent's first and last punches, only the improvement in skills, can be said to be visible to the naked eye. Qingtong kicked the guy upside down from more than 100 feet, and the young Wufu directly punched a wealthy mansion through his back. Under a big tree in the street outside the wall, the bright red robe gently touched the trunk with his elbow. Stop the figure. Along the brand new road, Qingtong slowly walked out of the hole in the wall, smiled and asked, "Create your own?" If it weren't for the intent of these punches to be incomplete, it would be a good punch that the world is waiting for. Chen Pingan smiled and said, he created it. It is Chao Si's 5 styles of boxing. Before the Confucian Temple asked about fist, Chao Si frankly said that he had created more than 30 kinds of fist moves, and less than half of them were used at that time. Chen Pingan has imitated 5 of them today: the Epiphany, the Running Water, and the Dragon Gossip. Lingjiu Mountain. Shen Shao. Chao Si didn't mind others learning boxing at all. Most of them cannot learn. The handful of martial artists who were barely able to catch up with Chao Si's back were not much better. Those who learn from me live, those who resemble me die. This kind of remarks may be arrogant to others, and it is inevitable that there is a bit of suspicion of condescending preaching. But for Chao Si, it might really be an extremely calm truth. Even Chen Pingan doesn't really want to learn these punches. The only use is to change the way to beat his body. Different fist moves, fist techniques, and principles can sharpen the different boundaries of a person's physical body. Qingtong laughed and said, "Is it also stealing punches?" Chen Pingan corrected, "Learning boxing." Qingtong wondered, is there a difference? When speaking, Qingtong's feet intertwined with thunder and lightning, such as pedaling 2 thunderboards. It is still a boxing method, but the effect is equivalent to the Xianjia shrinking ground method. Qingtong had already reached out his hand to hold down the forehead of the bright red robe, and ran forward all the way, and at the same time he delivered a punch quickly and hit the opponent's throat. It doesn't matter whether you steal fist or learn fist, as an end martial artist, who can't? With this fist, Qingtong is exactly like Chen Pingan's drum beating style. The 5 fingers of his right hand are like a hook, and he firmly presses down on that forehead. Although his right hand is like hitting a rapidly rotating millstone, even the 5 fingers ooze blood and a tiger's mouth. After splitting, Qingtong's left hand is still punching, but I want to see if his bulging fist intent can support more than 20 punches, and the other party can carry a few punches, whether his fist intent is broken first, or the opponent's physique was the first to show signs of cracking. In the blink of an eye, Qingtong delivered 19 unknown punches one after another, and both sides had already walked out several miles in the city. During the period, Chen Pingan suddenly accelerated the retreat figure 3 times, and Qingtong followed the gourd to draw a scoop, just at the same speed as Chen Pingan, like a cat teasing a mouse. However, Qintong had to admit that his 19 punches were not light, but it was a pity that they didn't mean enough. The exchanges between the masters of martial arts, learning boxing is simple and simple. It is easy to be like 7 or 8 fractals, but it is difficult to say that it is difficult to learn boxing, because it is difficult to get its essence, and it is difficult to accurately see through each other's pure mouth. The circulation route of true energy, and this path is like a fairy parent's doctrine with complicated text and obscure content. For the mountain realm, especially the end martial artist, if it is just a fist to learn a similar shape, then what's the point? However, Qintong is not discouraged at this moment, and it is a big deal that he will repeatedly practice hundreds of thousands of punches in the future. If hundreds of thousands are not enough, then millions of punches. The world's boxing moves are all dead after all. Only the person who handed the fist is alive. Qintong stood still, and replaced Pure Zhenqi for the first time. Both sides had left the city. Chen Pingan fell to the ground in the distance like a broken kite. Qintong smiled and said, "It's almost a quarter of an hour before a stick of incense, can you do it?" Chen Pingan stood up, took a deep breath, and exhaled a breath of despair. Suddenly he seemed to have changed himself, from the old man who had not waved in the past to a young man with high spirits, and reached out his hand to his waist. The hilt of the narrow sword smiled and said, "If you only talk about the height of the boxing technique, it is really difficult for you to match the half-god, or is it that you are the best at using weapons?" With arms around his chest, Qintong smiled and said, "Even if I'm barehanded, wouldn't it be more than enough to beat you?" What's more, Qintong didn't really put out his punches. I was afraid that if one was not careful, he would hit the opponent heartily, and if he failed to hold his hand, he would beat the opponent down, or simply kill the opponent directly. Qintong glanced at the folded knife on the other's waist and stretched out a hand. "If you use a knife, you can do whatever you want." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "You seem to have forgotten to say, after 2/4 of an hour, how do we count win or lose?" Qintong said, "Then fight until one party admits defeat." Chen Pingan nodded and said, "Of course." Slowly pulled the Zhanka knife out of its sheath. The narrow knife was extremely long and bright as water. Chen Pingan opened his palm again, and actually grabbed the blade directly, and stretched out his hand. The sharp blade, if ordered, glowed with a weird and extremely colorful color. Qintong is slightly confused. Is this okay? To be precise, the opponent is not cheating. Chen Pingan didn't use monk's methods. It was more like a temporary casting, tempering. Qintong suddenly asked, "Is that really that John can?" Chen Pingan, who held the knife in his right hand, did not directly answer the question. He drew the knife out of the sheath again with his left hand, and said with a smile, "Guess again." Qintong's heart was shaken. Staring at the guy with the knife in both hands, Qintong smelled a dangerous breath. Qintong didn't underestimate the slightest thoughts anymore, and instead took the initiative to start another ancient boxing frame. A majestic fist is actually like that monk's appearance. Around Qintong, a strange picture is revealed. Some people play the pipe with only the head and limbs, but no trunk. A headless man with his hands like a flute. Only the upper body of the woman is left, stroking the chin, as if being cut off by a guqin. Those with or without arms, there are jigu hanging on their sides, shaking their heads and shaking their heads, making a slap of jigu. All kinds of strange shapes are incredible. And what makes Qintong most annoyed is the execution held by one of the legendary 12 high-level gods. Regarding this magic weapon, just the phrase, "The one who is fortunate to see this blade is misfortune," let Qintong feel a kind of disgust and fear. If it is said to be a slashing survey, it is only the genius who is the most overwhelming flood dragon. Then this execution, that has disappeared for thousands of years, after this life, I believe that no matter it is a pure martial artist or a cultivator, no one wants to see this blade with his own eyes. Chen Pingan walked forward, holding a knife in both hands, and one of the swords glowed with colorful colors, and the execution of the execution, on the side of the blade, was actually pitch black, as if opening up a two-virtual boundary, especially at the tip of the knife. Dragging an extremely slender glazed light beam was actually a horrible sight of some kind of sharp blade cutting through the long river of time. And that bright red robe did not rush and smiled, instead of waiting until I have been hit by countless knives. This pair, the immortal, is broken and severely damaged. It takes hundreds of years to repair it. At that time, Qin Tong's predecessors will take out hand weapons to contend with it. Will it be too late? Isn't the loss of face even greater? If it's me, don't pay attention to trivial things. Be pragmatic. Of course, winning this competition is the top priority. The earth trembled violently, and thunder bursts deep in the ground. Chen Pingan was no longer visible, and a large hole appeared at his feet. The lute player with only his head and torso was broken with a single knife. The headless flute player, with a flute on his body, flashes the light of the knife and turns into powder. Only the upper body of the woman playing the piano was cut through her chest, and she appeared in a bright red robe. She stretched out her arms and held a narrow knife to lift the former into the air. The body shape transfer and the speed of the knife are really too fast. Chen Pingan seems to be in a situation where people go with their fists. This should be a taboo of martial arts. Qin Tong had retreated to the top of the city, overlooking the sword-bearer outside the city. The other person seemed to be laughing silently. Those visions are only half-truths condensed by fist and will not hurt Qin Tong's physique at all, but the guy in his sight made Qin Tong feel jealous for the second time. For the first time, it was just execution of this external object. This time, it was that person. It's so weird. Not the kind of blindly perverse, cruel, and tyrannical. But it is the kind of cold, dead silence, pure ruthlessness, and inaccurate. It's like human nature has gone to the other extreme. Qin Tong didn't dare to take the slightest care, stretched out his hand, and condensed a huge weapon similar to a chop saber, aquamarine, with seal-carved talisman layer upon layer, and the light circulated. Standing on the top of the city, Qin Tong held the knife in both hands, went around behind, the back of the knife was attached to his back, and sneered, "The blade has no eyes. If unfortunately, you lack arms and legs, don't blame the heavens and others. This is what you asked for." Chen Pingan twisted his wrist lightly, and instantly shattered the graceful figure of the woman with the piano. He raised his head, looked at the white-haired old man, and said with a smile, "Tell you a truth, you are not a master at fighting." The Qin Tong Yin who was watching the battle from a distance had always been quite leisurely. When Chen Pingan pulled out the execution, he couldn't sit still, and then waited until Chen Pingan made his move, and then forced the Yangshan body back to on the top of the city. He threw away the golden leaf in his hand, turned his head and asked, "What's the matter?" Xiao Imo held the hiking stick with both hands. "Ask yourself. Yin God and Yang God are connected with each other and can be regarded as one person." Qin Tong Yinshan sighed, "It's hard to end the fight like this." Xiao Imo was a little surprised. How he felt this Yin God was a bit unusual. But it doesn't matter, Xiao Mo's attention is still on the battlefield where the two sides return to the city. What anxious, this is just the beginning of the show. In fact, Xiao Mo didn't know what the son thought about this questioning boxing, and how exactly he planned it. Xiao Mo only knows one thing, the son hasn't really given a killer tip yet, which means that there is still a fight in this fight. Because Chen Pingan had leaked the details to Xiao Mo. There are only 2 moves to create your own boxing technique, which is connected with swordsmanship. One of the punches, named Pianyue by Chen Pingan, is the latter of the extremes of simplicity and complexity. The first time he performed this feast was in Dali capital city, to clean up the proud man of heaven who had almost caused a catastrophe. The reason why Qi practitioners are the least willing to provoke sword repair, the most troublesome aspect of Jianxiu's life, flying sword, is not only the arrogance and unreasonableness of one sword breaking 10,000 laws, but also that after flying sword hurts people, the remaining sword energy will last for a long time. Making waves will cause a kind of lasting damage and destruction to the small world of the human body. This is the case with Chao Sis, Eastern Flower, and Chen Pingan's Pianyu is even more true. If this punch is hit on an opponent, the fist will spread extremely quickly and concealed, just like in the enemy's Xiaoxiandi mountain in Hanoi. There will be countless. The cliff carvings of Dagui Wafu are almost irreversible. What remains is the legacy of the avenue. If the injured want to repair, they can only grind away those stone carvings. Xiao Emo glanced at the fallen sycamore leaves that Qingtong had discarded. One leaf, one world, is a picture scrolled similar to a horse-drawn picture, but it doesn't involve the long river of time. Otherwise, if Qingtong could draw so much time and water, he would have been a cultivator of the 14th realm long ago. The mountain leaders of Tonggizhao are Tonggizong and Yuguizong, who are facing each other from the north to the south. This involves an illusion from many years ago. These two long-lasting ancestors did not appear out of thin air, but came into being. According to the Sun, the former little master, who is now the Saint of Rites, had made some attempts. I first met Andy Feng in a fire temple in Dali capital, because those baihuanyang made of 10,000 years of soil were sealed by Qin Pingan. He guessed that the wine is a kind of tribute. Speaking, he first mentioned a thread, talked about 3 tribute objects, and actively talked about the 6 palaces of the ghost mansion of Fengdu Ghost Mansion, and the great authority of Fang's Hushan Qingjun. Dixian's Thin Book. In short, these are some new etiquette formulated by the ritual saints. Later, Chen Pingan followed the vine and asked more inside information with his husband in private. At the same time, Li Sheng had personally invited Mr. Sanshan Zhouho. According to the secret revealed by Lu Qin, Chen Pingan believed that Mr. Sanshan Zhouho was willing to cooperate with Li Sheng in the era of Taiping Huanyuji Shou, when he erected a monument. Re-emergence to help the Saint of Rites reorder the sky, originally used specifically to target the world's ghosts. Chen Pingan guessed that if the ritual saint's move was successful and all-encompassing, it is estimated that there would be no subsequent battle to slay the dragon. But this is not the most exaggerated place. The other thing that the husband said is the real shocking world. There was once a chance to give birth to the Lord of Humanity in the world. This is an extremely risky move, which is tantamount to a way out of the Saint of Rites. And once it proves to be effective, then the status of the Confucian temple may not rise but fall, but will take advantage of the trend to go down a step, just like the temple officials of later generations, assisting the monarch of the righteousness, and create a 10,000-year-old temple. Some Haiyan Qingping's life. After that, Chen Pingan went through the secret files in the Gongda Lin of the Confucian temple. As expected, there was an unexpected gain. It was during that period that one of the masters of the Middle-earth divine continent once cut a leaf of tong leaf into a square shape and gave it to my younger brother. This is the so-called Tongya Fingdi, and one-leaf Feng Ho, on the Confucian temple Gongda Lin secret file. He founded the country on the bank of the big water named Fendu in Tonggizhao, the main tributary of Dadu at that time. There are Huehe and Shujiang. Today, the buried river of the Daquan dynasty and the Lin River are just one of the inconspicuous river sections and tributaries back then. It is a pity that no matter what the reason is, the Saint of Rites failed to accomplish this after all. The battle within the city almost destroyed half of the city. Every time the blade hits, it is a torrential rain of sparks splashing all over, and the buildings on both sides are like falling leaves swept away by the autumn wind. Qing Tongjian's face was solemn, and he was at a loss for his carefully crafted magic knife, which was of extremely high rank. Xiao Emo stretched his waist and asked, "What is the origin of the Taoist priest who is respected by my son as Lu Zhu?" Qing Tong was a little absent-minded, and replied casually, True man Chunyang is a true Taoist man. His hometown is in the vast world, but the place of fame is the Qingming world, which is known as the #1 golden pill. He once traveled. After passing the lotus root flower blessed land, and seeing the old master at first sight, the old Hao master Ni Yuan Pin of the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, and later Yuzhani, to a certain extent, imitated the real person of Chunyang. There is an ancient chess record with a pure young Taoist, which is unknown and not widely spread. The wandering Taoist has a poem in the preface of the chess record, and he is invincible from the whole, and he has to be forgiving and forgiving. Therefore, people of insight, according to the naming habits of many handed-down copybooks, are known as Lan Kapu, also known as Chu Dong Pu. A full spectrum of 9 chess principles, a total of 36 chess games. It was a chess book compiled by the real person of Chunyang after he traveled to the blessed land of lotus roots. When the Taoist left the blessed land, the old Guanju seemed to appreciate the foreigner who was not high in his realm, and he personally sent his gift out of the country. Tongji's his central boundary, which was later the Great Spring Dynasty riding Crane City, and this was the site where the fairy riding a crane soared. Like the red leaves in the ditch, it is often related to the poem. There are many poems in Haoran, and whenever they talk about Wudong, they are often related to wells. For example, the introductory purple mandarin duck, Jinjing double phoenix tree. There are also similar trips to the country, but also a long dream. The parasol tree fell into the well, and a leaf flew into the Milky Way. The gate of the lotus root flower blessed land is actually a well. Regarding this point, Chen Pingan, who is currently on the battlefield, must have personal experience. Inside the city, there was a battlefield where the dust was scattered. The white-haired old man, with blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, especially the entire arm holding the knife, almost all muscles collapsed. The outer body of this young god looked at the bright red man who stood up from the ruins and couldn't help but sigh. It's not a human being. If this guy had lost the yin god and the yang god body for reasons of harmony, otherwise the 3 plus the double swords and the long sword hovering outside the city would be a tricky one. Qing Tong Yin god glanced at that stick of incense intentionally or unintentionally. Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Is this a feng shui turn?" Qing Tong changed the subject, "I didn't want to find old friends in the Qingming world." Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Don't worry." Qing Tong hesitated to speak but stopped. Xiao Mo said, "I know that until now, you in the city still have something to hide. You have to wait for the moment when 2/4 of an hour is over." Qing Tong shook his head and said, "If there is no restriction on a stick of incense, and if you drag it on, Chen Pingan will definitely lose even if he has those 2 knives. Xiao Mo wondered, whose handwriting is for a stick of incense for 2/4 of an hour? Qing Tong is helpless. Within the rules allowed by the Confucian Temple, some of the benefits related to the luck of mountains and rivers, the Qingtong Town Demon Tower and the detached Taoist Temple, both share the spoils in the same way. However, Guandao Temple only pins the tip, and on the side of the parasol tree, there is a bit of cold leftovers. In the far-reaching Taiping mountain turmoil that year, an old ape with a sword on his back killed the gentleman Zhong Kuei of Dafu Academy. Because according to the deduction result of the Wild Army account, Zhong Kuei was said to be equivalent to 5 fairyland sword repairs. After the white ape succeeded, it was immediately returned to Taiping Mountain by the angry Lord Tian. He held the moon mirror and chased him for thousands of miles. The white ape was severely injured, and finally escaped to a broken dragon vein. The young Taoist priests of Taiping Mountain converged, and then they were easily found by the master of the old temple. In a summer resort called Fendua Dragon Palace, the master of Old Temple accidentally appeared and stood on the ruins of Solongtai. It is similar to a kind of family law service, which was the place where lynching was used in Dadulonggong in the early years. Among them, the white ape was thrown into the lotus flower-blessed land by the old Taoist priest. He lost all his wisdom and had to practice again. The young Taoist priests simply did not agree with each other, and all their incomplete souls were removed from their bodies, and their skins were limp. The former floated out of his body, and was choked by the neck by the old Taoist priest, while the latter's fate was exactly the same as that of a white ape. It's really just because of one sentence, a decent title. Call the old master of the predecessor. As a result, on the side of the old Guanju, it became, "You are a demon race, you keep calling my seniors, calling yourself juniors. Call me an old beast." It's just that the remnant soul of this monster race is about one soul and four souls. The old Guanju did not have a sleeve to make it ashes. Instead, he opened a side to it, and deliberately left the hibiscus crown, and left it together on the stage of the Lock Dragon. However, he did not let the other party rush around, so that the spirit of this great demon was detained in the crown of the road, firmly nailed to the roots of the mountain in the prison site of Taiping Mountain. Have not been able to get out of trouble so far. The old Guanju also secretly shot, concealing the sky and crossing the sea with the sky-reaching means, which is equivalent to reserving a part of the mountain, water and air transport for the gathering of the Taiping Mountains, and will not completely disperse. Otherwise, after that battle, the monks of Taiping Mountain would be dead, and the whole mountain top was broken everywhere. It was just a Diablo basket of dilapidated sieve. Tonggishao was vulnerable to a blow, and it was immediately occupied by the monster army. It was probably Wen Hai's careful show of favor to the old master, and did not move the crown or the Taiping Mountain. The site was opened as a mountain water ferry. It was just a reward for the demon monk who had been hiding in the Hauran for many years, and for the real body where the rest of the soul was. The big demon on one side. In fact, this is why the boundary of the Tapingshan site still has a lingering remnant Dao rhyme after the moon mirror is completely broken. Only then did several local forces, including Xiaolongqiu, come to covet the tastelessness of Taiping Mountain. The old View Master was on the dragon-locking platform, and certain words were great rebelliousness. He heard the trembling of the young fellow's heart, but he couldn't help but listen, and he couldn't do it if he wanted to be a deaf person. Obviously, he was forcibly pulled into a thief boat by that stinky old man. During the period, the old Guanju said something similar to the conclusion of a coffin to the junior. Not daring to kill Chen Pingan is tantamount to missing a great opportunity. Because if you kill this person, you will have great merit in the wild world. The old master can also take advantage of the trend to bring Chen Pingan into the Taoist temple, raising the position of the futon a lot. The so-called futon of the stinky nose, of course, is the entire Guandao temple, which is a blessed lotus root bordering the lotus cave sky. As for why Qin Qingdu lent Qin Pingan's sword, Lao Guanju gave part of the truth at that time. The purpose is to transfer certain cause and effect to Qin Pingan's shoulders. When he was young, he carried a sword on his back and went back to the Hauran world from the Hanging Mountain. There is a town demon building in Tonggishao, and enter the lotus root's blessed land. The young hermit bears the real name of the great demon. Hadao half the Great Wall of Jinchi. One person defended the city, and luckily survived. See the sun again. Time is also fate. Time, yeah. One drink and one peck, is it natural? Xiao Imo glanced at the incense stick, stretched out his hand to grab the trekking stick, and slowly stood up. A stick of incense is about to burn out. Qing Tong asked, should you be? Just breathed a sigh of relief, because the outcome was a foregone conclusion, but when Xiao Imo got up, Qing Tongyin God had to tighten his heartstrings again. Is it because you want bad rules to choose to shoot? Xiao Mo smiled and said, you want something wrong. The battlefield has already moved outside the city, and the two sides have replaced each other with a sigh of pure infuriance. Just across the big mountain with a single peak, the two sides are located in front of the mountain and behind the mountain. I traveled many places with Xiao Mo. In addition to repeatedly practicing the sword light escape technique, Chen Pingan, in addition to retreating in the cave of the Xiandu mountain, is more like a real cultivator. He is indeed practicing seriously. As for the practice of martial arts and boxing, and outsiders may think it is very simple, but when done, it is no different from ascending to the sky. Half punch. Repeatedly, only practice half punches. But there is always no way, and it can even be said to be no way to enter. Since you can't even seem to look like a god, how can you talk about it? And this half fist happened to be embedded in the mountains and rivers of Qin Pingan's body. It was a half punch of an 11th realm martial artist. A bright red robe was put into its sheath, and he began to sweep backwards, and only when he was hundreds of miles away from the high mountain, he began to rush forward. Suddenly Qin Pingan's figure disappeared out of thin air. In order to deliver this punch, Chen Pingan even had to quickly take off two narrow knives and throw them away before his body dissipated. Xiao Mo slightly grasped the green bamboo stick in his hand, squinted and stood still. The hair of King Tongyin God's temples fluttered wanton, his expression flustered, and his voice was as thin as a mosquito and flies. Not far away, the ground covered with golden leaves began to drift towards the same side. After the mountain, the white-haired old man who had also reached the peak with his fist, suddenly widened his eyes because there was no mountain in front of him. End of this chapter. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.